for being here today. Welcome to our special guests. Do we have any committee business?
Just really quickly, I'll mention that the mics on the table, the black here, you want to be careful of those. Don't put your papers over them. Careful not to wrestle papers in front of them. It does mess with the sound, please. And then just for your information, we do have an overflow room that our departments will be coming from. It's a conference room down the hallway, so we're streaming I was going to say show, but committee, sorry, from there. And then if the public comes in, they can also go down there if they wanted to, if they don't feel squished in here. So just information for you. That's all.
Wonderful. Thank you. Anything else from committee members? Seeing none, all right. Oh,
Sorry,
go
I
ahead.
should have mentioned one more thing. We did email minutes out to the committee, so I don't know if everyone had a chance to see those. They probably went out about noon. Okay, so you have those in your email, so you can wait until the next time. to
Yeah.
review those, but they're from Tuesday's meeting.
Thank you for bringing that up. I did, Bruce and I chatted about that, and we thought maybe we would wait for the Tuesday meeting to give folks time to review that.
Perfect.
Okay, wonderful. All right, well then we'll introduce Sheriff Cliff Harold.
All right.
Thank you.
Well, thank you very much, Chair Means. Budget Committee, appreciate the opportunity to be here. I have, as we heard just a little bit during Steve's budget presentation, been working on the public safety levy, and so I've done 37 or 38 public information sessions on that. And meanwhile, the chief deputy and crew have been prepping for this, so I'm just here to say good afternoon and a couple opening remarks, and then they're going to take it from there. I loved how Steve's budget presentation, as he started, at one point I leaned over to the chief and said, so far we're right on script, because that's about the first, 10 or 12 minutes of my community presentation, is talking about why Lane County is in the situation it's in, and with the lack of resources. And as someone who's been a part of the office for over 30 years, it feels like my whole career has been explaining to people why we aren't able to do more. And so it's sort of surprising to me when I encounter an awful lot of Lane County residents who don't know. And so as I've done these community presentations, many, many times people have come up to me afterwards and said, Sheriff, we gotta let the community know about this. And I say, absolutely, can you help me with that? We as in the Sheriff's Office has used the Budget Committee presentation as an opportunity to try and inform the public about the significant lack of resources that we have. And so you'll hear some of that today. We've also heard feedback from the Budget Committee to try not to spend too much time on those things and try and provide you with information about where we see ourselves going in the future or current projects that are underway. But we will continue to have that underlying thing, because we do feel like so many folks just really don't realize that the resource isn't there until they need it. So you hear a little bit about that today. And then the other thing that we've oftentimes in our office used this for is as we're developing leaders within our organization, we have them plug into this process. And so we'll have presenters today from various parts of our organization, and they're prepped and knowledgeable about their areas. And so with that, I'm going to get out of their way. Thank you.
Hello everybody, my name is Carl Washington. I'm the Chief Deputy at the Sheriff's Office. I want to say thank you for this opportunity to talk a little bit about this organization that I care and love so much about. I will say that our office is absolutely full of men and women who do amazing work on a daily basis, and I could not be more proud of the people who work for the Sheriff. So with that, we'll get rolling. And so the mission of the Sheriff's Office is to conserve peace. That is directly from statute as to responsibility of the Sheriff, and to do that, our organization is broken up into 4 divisions. The Office of the Sheriff, the Operations Support Division, the the Police Services Division, and the Corrections Division. You're going to hear a representative from each one of those divisions talk a little bit about each division. So obviously, the Sheriff and his executive assistant make up one division. That's the Office of the Sheriff. The Sheriff is our elected leader and guides us in our daily work. And on a side note, he's a pretty good boss too. Our budget is kind of like the overall county budget. It's pretty complex. We have a lot of funding streams for it. As you guys are all well aware, the general fund, the public safety levy that funds portions of our jail, We have contracts with various community partners with cities of Crestville and Bonita and other government entities. We have dispatching contracts. We have jail bed contracts for the city of Eugene and a variety of other things. One thing I really wanted to kind of point out in this slide though is that I think the Sheriff's Office does a pretty good job of trying to find grants to enhance our services or to be innovative in our services that we otherwise would not have the means to do. So we'll talk about some of those coming up. I won't spend very much time on this, but this is just a pie graph kind of showing you the breakdown of our resources, which are quarterly in your books. And the one thing I really want to point out about this is that you can see kind of our expenditures, that staff is much like most county governments, but staff is our greatest resource, and that is where our greatest amount of money is spent. We are also a little bit expensive, as our next M&S category shows, is it requires a lot of special tools and equipment and our cars and our uniforms and all the stuff that we use to do our jobs, and so that's why that's kind of our next greatest expenditure. So now I get the opportunity to talk about the Operations Support Division. That's the division that I manage. This is mostly made up of non-sworn personnel, who I often kind of refer to as the unsung heroes of the Sheriff's Office. These men and women are the kind of oftentimes kind of behind the scenes, you know, doing the work that needs to get done. Sorry, I got off my notes for just a second, and I don't have my glasses on, so. The work of the Operational Support Division oftentimes is the work to meet many of the statutory requirements that the sheriff has. The division includes our civil unit, our concealed weapons permit unit, dispatch, records, office professional standards, training, our PIO, and many other functions. These work units require and adhere to statutory requirements and stay current with many of the changing laws. Examples of some of the statutory requirements that have changed recently is there were training requirements for all of our certified staff to include both deputies and dispatchers. Over the last couple of years, there's been a lot of legislative changes to what it takes to hire people in law enforcement, what training they have to have, just a variety of different things. So that's been something that's been going on in this division. Other recent changes are requirements for like how we do backgrounds and what is required to hire certain employees. So an example of this is previously our dispatchers did not have to have a psychological evaluation like our deputies do, but that is a statutory change that just happened, and so in the near future we will be sending all of our dispatchers to see the psychologist before we can hire them like we do deputies. This is no small cost, by the way. Those are expensive processes and adds to what we're going to talk about a little bit, adds to the time it takes to hire people. So, and many of these statutory requirements don't come with any additional funding, or none of them do. It just adds workload and cost to what we're already doing. So, some of the changes coming up in our division. We're super excited about the fact that we're in the midst of implementing our body-worn camera system. Some of you guys probably remember we had a $650,000 grant to do that, which pretty much paid for the equipment, the training, the storage, the video. But we also realized that with this new system, we're going to have quite a bit more work in getting evidence to the district attorney's office, answering public records requests, doing redaction, and this is probably going to result in the need of hiring another property evidence technician. So the Sheriff's Office is currently trying to assess how we're going to fill that need and make that hiring position, or hire that position. We're also adding a communications network coordinator. This is a position that is actually funded by LRIG and our other public safety partners. This position will do work directly for LRIG in the fact that it will maintain the core of the radio system. The core is basically a computer system that makes sure that the LRIG system is operating the way it's supposed to. This work is currently being done by the City of Eugene, but we're going to transfer the work and the funding for that position to the Sheriff's Office, and the Sheriff's Office is going to take over that responsibility. The next thing I want to talk about is something I'm pretty excited about, and that is our employee wellness program. We are very dedicated to the overall wellness of our employees. We want our staff to be grounded in all 4 of the pillars of wellness: physical wellness, mental health wellness, spiritual wellness, and financial wellness. It's my goal that, we hire really good people, and we know that this job is hard on them. It's my goal that in 25 years, that after somebody retires, they're in as good of or better shape in those 4 pillars than the day that they started. And we all know that this career is challenging on those who take advantage of it as a place of employment. So we've created a wellness committee, and we're finding ways to develop programs and support our staff in all 4 of these areas of wellness. And through this process, we've also partnered with other community organizations who want to support the wellness of our staff and who understand the additional challenges of working within the law enforcement arena. Some of the key initiatives that we have going on in our division this next year is accreditation. The Sheriff's Office is going through an accreditation process. Again, you might remember that we got a grant to fund this last year, and we are working through that process. Accreditation is basically an external audit of our policies and procedures to make sure that we are keeping up with industry best practices. And as we go through that, we've partnered with the Oregon Accreditation Alliance, who will be our accrediting body, and they're helping us through this process. We've hired a program manager to kind of help us figure this out. This is the first time we've been through the accreditation process, and he is helping us audit our own policies and procedures and make sure that we are hitting the standards. Interestingly is you can't just show them a policy and say, hey, we have that policy and we're following that policy. You also have to actually show proofs of policy. So if a policy says you're doing X, Y, or Z, I then need to find a way to say, here's proof that we are also following this policy. So it's a pretty good situation. We expect to be done with this accreditation process by the end of the year. Statutorily, it's not even required until the end of next year, so we'll be ahead of the game here. So, and paid for mostly through grant funding. So, I want to talk a little bit about recruitment and retention. I think it's known that nationally this is an issue, and it's a lot harder now to hire than it used to be, and this is especially true with law enforcement. Fewer people than ever are applying for positions for the Sheriff's Office. And this is true in both our sworn and our non-sworn positions. So it's not just the law enforcement side, it's also our non-sworn positions. Oftentimes we are competing for the same people that the other law enforcement agencies are trying to hire, and applicants are in multiple hiring pools at one time. So what I'm seeing is that generally speaking, whoever can make that conditional offer of employment first gets the good applicant, and the rest of us are just spending money on trying to get them through the process for not. So along that line, many agencies in Oregon and along the West Coast are offering significant hiring bonuses. $25,000 bonuses is not uncommon. I'm aware of at least one agency on the West Coast is offering a $75,000 hiring bonus. In regards to our non-sworn personnel, that's also challenging to hire now too, because people have come to realize that there are other options than shift work, and there's remote work that are available to them, and frankly we don't have the ability to offer that in most of our positions. I know that the Sheriff's Office is not going to be in a position to be offering these significant hiring bonuses. I know that people are going to continue to have to come to work to do the work, but because of these competing benefits from both our private and public sector competition, we have to start looking at ways to think outside the box to do recruitment. We've looked through our hiring process to find ways to be more efficient, see if we can be quicker, what can we do even with these statutory requirements that we have that other agencies or other private employers don't necessarily have, and found some ways to speed some of that up. We've also encouraged our staff to be our recruiters. We've encouraged them, hey, when you're talking to somebody at the jail in the lobby, encourage them to put in an application. When you're out on patrol, encourage them to put an application. I can't tell you how many business cards a week I hand out to people and say, hey, we're hiring. and we've encouraged all of our staff to go through that same process. One of the things that has been successful for us for the last couple of years is we reinstituted our cadet program 3 years ago. And to date, we've hired 6 full-time employees from the cadet program, 4 of which are female deputies. And so recruiting and hiring female deputies is a pretty important thing, and our cadet program is really filling some of that void for us. We also encourage people to recruit people who I like to say what I have to offer people is our culture, and we have a great culture at the Sheriff's Office. And we encourage people to share what it is to work for the Sheriff's Office, that family-like culture, when we're talking to people in the community, and not to be afraid to share what our culture is with the community as we try to make our recruitment. I'm going to go ahead and move on from that. Operational efficiencies. We all know that we have tight budgets, and so we're constantly looking for new ways to perform our duties and to better serve our community. We have some initiatives that we're trying to do to examine our costs and look for additional ways to stretch our limited resources. One example of that is we recently partnered with the data analytics team to develop a software to really investigate our fleet spending and determine what those costs really are or aren't. So we now have a tool that we can use to better examine what our fleet costs are, and we'll be looking at that closely throughout the coming year as we decide what we can do better. Training. Sheriff's Office has been really doing some amazing work and developing some very innovative training initiatives. We've developed, and you're going to hear a little bit more about this in a little bit, but we developed what I believe is going to be a nationally recognized de-escalation training, and we've received grant money to pay for this training. We are requiring every staff member to participate in an additional 10 hours of de-escalation training regardless of their position. So whether you're a dispatcher, a facility support officer, a maintenance person, a deputy, everybody's going to get this training because the skills from it are so important. We've also made some important changes to our training software system. That's going to give us more training, there's more training available to our staff at a savings of thousands of dollars a year. So that's an exciting tool we're doing. And then I have to give a plug to one of my favorite people, which is Debbie Howler and her group. Our fiscal section manages over $10 million in grants. And not only do they track and manage our own budget, but they also help provide the fiduciary management over other programs outside of the Sheriff's Office to include LRIG and drug treatment courts. So I have phenomenal people that work for me, and they do great work, and they help other departments do their work. Some of the challenges, we've talked a little bit about it already, but our vacancy rate. Right now, we have 29 open positions at the Sheriff's Office. That's a little more than 9% of our overall positions. And as I mentioned, hiring is just not as simple as it was, and those requirements are getting even harder. Most of our positions have significantly higher requirements statutorily than any other county department. So we are trying to find a way to keep the foot on the pedal, so to speak, because every time you get behind, you just get further and further behind because of training cycles. One thing I want to talk about is our workspace. I like to joke with people that our office is kind of like the Winchester House, as in we have doors that lead to nothing, windows that you see nothing through. Frankly, the footprint of the Sheriff's Office is inefficient, it's cramped, it's unprofessional, and it's unsafe. The Sheriff's Office lobby is way too small to serve the community, and staff must work in cramped corners trying to serve the public. The office is literally physically divided by a public hallway that has street access. This puts us in a situation where we have to escort violent felony offenders through an open and unsecure hallway in the middle of regular public citizens who are just trying to get services through the Sheriff's Office. So I'm hoping that we are on track to find a solution to that problem. In that regard, our people who work in our reception area, our CHL and our civil unit, are getting further and further behind. As COVID has opened things up, the number of protection orders, evictions, and writs have dramatically increased over the last year, as have people who are seeking to get their concealed weapons permits. Currently, people who want to get those services have to schedule an appointment, and those appointments are months out. So our public is getting very frustrated by the timeline to achieve something that they have a legal right to achieve. This unit is also responsible for all the other parts of having a reception area to serve the public, to include doing fingerprinting for the public, registering sex offenders, and so much more other tasks that is just they're responsible for. What's an unknown, as we are still kind of in the waiting game about ballot measure 114, is how that will impact this already backlogged work unit. But if it ever is allowed to move forward as it's currently written, what we know is that the volume of work for the CHL unit will be untenable. It's likely to double the amount of work that they're required to do. So, and we are not keeping up with the pace as it is. One of the other things I want to point out is that the Sheriff's Office is basically dealing with a shrinking budget in the fact that internal costs and costs that are outside of our control are going up. I understand some of the reasons for it, but it is something that should be pointed out. Internal accounting costs for things like finance, legal, budget, HR, all those necessary things have gone up by about 10% this year. Our county licensing cost for TS has gone up by about 20% this year. Our fleet costs, so our fuel surcharge per gallon of gas went from 11 cents to 35 cents, or about a 218% increase this year. So all of these things are combining, are shrinking our budget, and we have no control of them. I have to point out too that we negotiated and settled the contract, our labor contract, and our employees needed the benefits that they got, but that also has an impact on our shrinking budget. So those are all challenges that we're going to be experiencing this next year, is trying to figure out what we've always done, which is continuing to try to provide the best services we can with resources that really are shrinking. Even though we're getting, our ask is greater, the percentage of usage of that amount of money is smaller than it once was. So with that, I think I'm going to turn it over to Lieutenant Rich Glessner, and he's going to talk to you about some of the good work that's happening in our police services. So.
Do we want to hold questions until the end, or do we have questions?
We have scheduled.
Do you have time?
We think time at the end for questions. So, but we're happy to answer them as we go.
We have, for the committee members, we have these cards
Question
here.
cards.
Maybe pass them down.
Pass the whole block.
These are for staff for assignments for later though, right? Not questions for.
Oh, I thought they were questions.
Whatever you want to use it for. Yeah, we'll collect them at the end if you don't get them answered, but if you want to use them to jot something down, remember, yeah.
I just draw pictures of the people across the aisle from you. Just want to make a paper airplane cards, please.
Okay, sorry about that. Go ahead.
All right, so again, I'm Lieutenant Rich Glessner, Police Services Lieutenant. And as you can see up here, this is our Police Service Division overview. One of the things I would like to point out on this slide is on the right, our contracting. Contracting with local city, state, and federal partners. It's just essential to us conserving the peace within Lane County. Nearly half of our deputies that are assigned to the Police Service Division are funded by contracts. And so these deputies, they work in specific areas or perform enforcement tasks related to an agreement with the agency that funds their position. So contract deputies, they're not available for general county law enforcement, and they can only be used during emergencies or when working overtime and then being paid out of the general fund. Some of the changes. So the Oregon Criminal Justice Commission, they granted us funding granted funding to the Sheriff's Office to target large-scale illegal marijuana operations. The ATF also kicked in $200,000, and that supports 2 detectives and 1 sergeant. The National Guard also provided us an analyst to assist with gathering and organizing the intelligence, and there's usually massive amounts with these investigations. In July of 2022, we began using this funding to address these operations and to mitigate the problems they present to our community. So far to date, 13 search warrants have been served These investigations are often very complex, and they simply would not have been addressed without this grant funding. One of the warrants involved 7 different addresses. Another one involves 5 different addresses. And these local cases had ties to not only in the continental United States, but as far as Mexico, France, and China. To date, 55,000 illegally grown marijuana plants have been eradicated. 12,000 pounds of processed marijuana have been destroyed. 3,000 fentanyl pills have been seized. And nearly $850,000 of currency and silver have been seized. Most of these cases involved unregulated and hazardous conditions for the workers, our community, and had huge environmental impacts. 3 cases involved forced labor, where workers were often living on-site in deplorable conditions. As you can see, example in the 2 center pictures there, the top one is the living conditions, and that one in the center at the bottom there, that's a stagnant pond that they were actually using for bathing. And then in the bottom right corner there, this picture shows the aftermath of an unregulated butane hash oil lab. It exploded in Fall Creek. It caused significant damage to the property. If that had occurred during our fire season, it would have been terrible. It likely would have caused a wildfire in the steep timber, big timber, and it would have threatened definitely the community of Fall Creek and even the city of Lowell. The sheriff's office, we often coordinate with the Lane County Code Enforcement and the state water master during these investigations. Our goal for this grant funding is really just to deter the criminal organizations from setting up shop in our county. This is another one of our changes. The dedicated property crimes detective. It's one of our latest filled positions from last year's added 8 positions. Those added positions, they were funded for 5 years using SRS dollars. We were able to fill this position in January of this year. In just the last 5 months, Deputy John, who's the detective in charge of that, he's opened 22 felony theft cases, he's made 8 felony arrests, and he's recovered over $50,000 in property so far. So,
Including some of mine, by the way.
oh,
Thank you.
that's right. So we immediately started seeing the benefits of this position. So thank you for that.
And you said that was just since January?
Since January.
Wow.
Yeah. Some key initiatives. We'll start with the top, the district deputies. We have 4 district deputies. 2 currently are assigned to the Upper McKenzie and 2 assigned to West Lane. We've gotten a tremendous amount of positive feedback in regards to the work that they do. District deputies, they work off the community policing model. So not only do the traditional law enforcement activities, but they have the time to be involved in the community. School events, community events. It gives them the ability to connect with the community members and their districts, and then that helps build the strong relationships and just modern policing that's just so important. So all 4 of these positions were created in 2020 when the sheriff's office was given a one-time funding for 5 years. So that funding is due to end in 2025. This has been a really valuable resource for us, and we hope to continue it. And then digital forensics. This is another area that's become a critical component. The sheriff, in today's world, it's just so common to have cell phones, computers, security camera footage, and that could all be evidence in a crime. And all these items take a person that is trained in digital forensics to extract, download, actually analyze, and then properly store them into evidence. In 2012, we lost this position due to budget cuts. We did have a volunteer for a short period of time, but with advancements in technology and the need for the high level of training to do this work, we found that we needed someone just dedicated to this full-time. We were fortunate to have a patrol deputy that was really into computers, and he had all this necessary training to do this job. And unfortunately, that deputy did have to be removed from our patrol staffing levels in order to do this work. And then he also retired last month. So now we're without a dedicated position to do this work. We don't have any other deputies with that necessary training. So we are seeing a backlog in the processing of all that digital evidence. So that's going to be a really key position for us to get filled here as quick as possible. And the chief deputy hinted on this, the body worn cameras. It's been a long time coming. It's finally here. We just finished getting our deputies all through training, so we're looking forward probably in the next 2 or 3 weeks getting that up and running. And we're actually excited about the transparency it builds and the trust that it builds with our community members. And then last on this slide is going to be the fires. We're really hoping for a break this year. It's been the last 3 years in a row. We've responded to some pretty major fires, devastating fires. Last year's fire, Cedar Creek, it caused us obviously to evacuate the entire city of Oak Ridge. When these large-scale disasters happen, it does take a big toll on the sheriff's office, especially our resources. Our normal business and everyday calls for service, they still have to be managed even if we're evacuating a city. So large disasters like this, they require all our deputies to work a tremendous amount of overtime, and that also, our budget takes a big hit on those. Some of our challenges, well, patrol staffing levels continue to be our biggest challenge. With last year's added 8 positions, we went from .17 to .19 deputies per 1,000. And as you can see, the average of our 5 comparable counties is .4 per 1,000. So, we would have to hire an additional 75 deputies just to reach the average of our comparable counties. And if you remember, from that first slide is why I pointed it out, currently about half of that .19 are in contracted positions. So we're not even using them for our county, basic county law enforcement. Then, if you've been here in years past, I apologize, I sound like a broken record, but I cannot talk about challenges without talking about our fatal crash rates. We currently sit the second highest in the state for fatal car crashes. In 2022, we had 51 fatal car crashes, so that was up 70% from 2021. So ODOT hasn't completed the data for 2023 yet to date. I can tell you in the first month and a half of this year, we had 6 fatal car crashes. So if anything, we're staying right on track for that same number this year. So how do we reduce fatal car crashes? If you're here last year, it's 3-pronged. It's engineering, education, and enforcement. We do work closely with ODOT. We work closely with Public Works, and we're trying to improve our roadways. We're establishing safety corridors, like the London Road Safety Corridor. The Sheriff's Office, we educate the public through social media. We educate our public through press releases. On every fatal crash, we do a press release. And we do programs like you see up here every 15 minutes. And that was done at Mohawk High School. And we try and do one of those every year, and we go from high school to high school just trying to educate our youngest drivers. So the missing prong is enforcement. The Sheriff's Office, we haven't had a traffic team in over 10 years. And I would bet that everybody in this room, we all drive on these roadways, our families drive on these roadways, you've seen that dangerous driving, that behavior that you look around and you say, gosh, I wish there was a deputy here to stop them. And there just isn't. And that just shows every year, year after year, in our fatal crash numbers. So, that's all I have for the police service. I will turn it over to Sergeant Matt Wisco to go over the correction side of things. Thank you.
Thank you. Good job.
Afternoon, everybody.
Good afternoon.
We get here.
So last but certainly not least, I'm here to talk about corrections. I've been with the county for 20 years. I've spent since 2005 in the corrections division. I've loved every minute of it. It changes rapidly, we rapidly evolve. And I think just about everybody in here I've seen on a tour before. That's great. We can figure out this contraction. Quick overview of the jail. We have 411 bed facility split into two sections. It's the security section, which are our hard jail beds, and our alternative program section, which is housed over the Offender Management Center. It's adjacent to our building. We have 191 full-time employees. Of those 191 employees, we have deputies, records officers, facility support officers, administrative assistants, maintenance staff, and transport security. Our two biggest contracts in the corrections division are with WellPath for our medical and mental health services, and Trinity Services, who does our meals and our laundry, 365 days a year, 7 days a week. And I broke the technology.
Yeah, that's what I did.
And just to
The sheriff was nice enough to let me use his glasses.
just help them go forward.
Budget
Yeah.
cuts. One paragraph.
No.
You should put a Band-Aid in the middle of it just to make
This is
it.
the one I'm on.
Okay.
All right, so let's talk about some of our changes in the division. We have a lot, like I said, we changed, that's the one constant with us is we change, we try to improve. But recently, we added an additional sergeant to our mental health team from security. That additional sergeant we recognized was needed because we have an increase in AIC. I'm sorry, let me do an administrative. AIC is the language we use that replaced inmate. Back in 2019, there was a House bill that readdressed that. So when I say AIC, that's what I mean. It's a person in our custody, adult in custody. So when I say that, that's what that means. And I say it a lot. So. All right. With the increase in our AIC population's mental health acuity, we realized we really need to put resources towards this, and our mental health sergeants, they work with WellPath Mental Health, the courts, and the community partners to help this population in our facility, especially when they're transitioning out, really help augment that mental health portion that we have. We also put on them our internal discipline process. So if somebody breaks a rule in jail, they go through a due process, and the mental health sergeants look at that, and if there is a mental health component to that, they weigh that into our findings. We've also developed a Corrections Division Crisis Intervention Team. This is also another team. This is a team made up of deputies and sergeants. They also augment mental health team, specifically for when we have an AIC or a situation that's at that crisis level. Their goal is to temper or de-escalate that situation, try to reduce, any physical confrontations we have. Some of our other changes, training. So we looked at our training, we looked at those physical interactions, and we realized we train a lot. We train a lot separately. Verbal de-escalation, use of force, physical skills. We have something called defensive tactics, and it's exactly what it sounds like. It's defensive tactics. How do you, in this line of work, a dangerous line of work, protect yourself? But we realized that those survival skills, we trained everybody, they were great, but they encompassed 1 to 5% of our physical interactions. Our other physical interactions tend to be smaller, but we wanted to find a way to maybe temper those a little bit. So we looked at training and decided to bring in some other elements. We brought in members of our crisis negotiation team, members of our verbal de-escalation instructors, as well as our defensive tactics instructors, and combined it all into one, this multidisciplinary approach to be able to tackle these everyday situations that we have go on and try to resolve them in a non-physical way. And changes also, this is a holdover from last year as well as ARPA. We received a pretty sizable amount of money to upgrade the facility through the ARPA grant. We expect to break ground here in August, late August, early September, and we hope to have it done. We anticipate to have it done in early spring of 2025. So these upgrades are pretty significant. I'm going to go through them real quick. We're going to upgrade our central control. Our central control is kind of like the central nervous system to the building. They open doors. They work like a dispatch. They control movement inside the perimeter. It's pretty outdated stuff. I believe a lot of parts we have to, our crack maintenance team actually has to buy off eBay because machines are so old you can't buy anything new, any replacement part for them. Upgrading our audio video security. We're gonna replace our outdated fire alarm system, which is along the same lines. New uninterruptible power supply. Adding intercoms to AIC cells that gives us instant two-way communication with the adult in custody. So if there's an emergency, they can immediately reach out to a deputy. Modernized detention control, allowing remote access, which will allow us to open doors from a remote location. It's going to increase efficiency quite a bit. Replace existing doors to accommodate all this new system. We are one of the few detention facilities, let's say in the state, if not the nation, that still has wooden detention doors. And we have a lot of wood doors. If you've ever been through the facility, you've seen a lot of wood doors. We learned specifically in COVID, these doors are very difficult to clean, and they get dirty, I can assure you. So we're also going to be adding non-contact interview booths. That way our mental health staff, our medical staff can meet with AICs in the housing area instead of having to send AICs to meet them, which will also improve our efficiencies. And we hope to redesign pretrial services. Their space is pretty cramped and they're a pretty integral part of the corrections division. Those officers from the court, they do a lot of great stuff for us, and we would love to have them to have a space that reflects that. Key initiatives. All right. I'm going to start right off with alternative programs. I wasn't going to read any of this, but I really like this paragraph. I'm going to read it to you. Research shows that individuals who are able to maintain employment, housing, and community ties are less likely to reoffend. Our alternative programs, such as electronic monitoring program, the sheriff's work crew, community service, and sit-ins, provided individuals the opportunity to maintain those core fundamentals to be productive members of the community while navigating the court system or serving their sentence. Alternative programs are also key in assisting with the management of limited jail beds, allowing these critical beds to be used for higher risk individuals. Alternative programs are a critical component of the justice system that benefits our community in the long run. And the reason I read that is it really captures our alternative program as well. Alternative to jail. That's just the best way to remember it. It's alternative to taking up a hard jail bed in the facility, specifically for some of our lower risk offenders. Within our alternative custody programs, we have electronic monitoring program. Electronic monitoring provides another avenue for individuals to serve their sentence when other alternative programs may not be appropriate, say the sheriff's work crew. Court staff that work with pretrial services, they use this evidence-based risk assessment tool And as they are assessing or reviewing pretrial defendants for potential release, electronic monitoring offers another resource for them. It encourages compliance, adds a layer of accountability, and having the ability to use that for pretrial defendants reduces also utilizing jail beds to hold those specific defendants. In addition to pretrial services, our alternate programs have worked with parole and probation, alternative courts, to kind of set up a system to, again, reduce the use of jail beds for folks that are going to be sanctioned. It gives them an alternative to sanctioning somebody to a hard bed. So they can say, you're going to wear this ankle monitor, you're going to report at these times, as opposed to you're going to sit in jail for 4 days, 5 days, 6 days. Again, encourages them to complete and also has that layer of accountability. I can't say enough how electronic monitoring, alts in general, are a critical component of the justice system. So the Sheriff's Work Crew and Community Service and the sit-in program, I'm sure a lot of you have seen the Sheriff's Work Crew out and about. They work with our population, offer alternatives to our incarceration. Staff are able to work with the courts and sentenced offenders to create an achievable means for them to fulfill their court requirements. And again, it touches with that paragraph I read. It allows them to maintain those, they still get to go home at night. They don't lose their job. Pro-social connections, things that help them succeed. All right, mental health services. I'm going to move away from alts and mental health services. No, I'm sorry. I'm moving into community engagement. We recognize that corrections in general, not just us, but specifically with us, we're kind of hidden from the community. A lot of people have an understanding what they think jail is. Most folks, when they come through our building, get a real understanding of what jail is and all the great work my deputies do there every day. We've worked really hard to open ourselves up to not only the community, but our community partners, our county departments. Like I said, I think everybody in here I've seen come through, and I would say in the past year, we've toured hundreds of folks from the public and our community partners through the facility. And it really lets us show how the jail fits into the criminal justice system and how we're a big component of the criminal justice system. Another community outreach, basically, members of the corrections team presented at the National Commission on Correctional Healthcare Conference in Denver to other correctional and healthcare leaders across the country. They presented our jail wellness program that we have at our jail, and how collaboration between corrections staff, mental health staff, community partners led to an overall safe working conditions for our staff, as well as safer conditions for our adults in custody. This was well received and sparked interest from facilities across the nation. Little Lane County Jail. Over the last several years, our average daily population has declined. It's based on prosecutorial discretion. I think we can move. Judicial discretion, officer discretion on the scene. But a big part of our average daily population has to do with our use of alternative programs and not holding people in jail that can still function and work through the system. But what that's left is the folks that are in jail are the folks that can't function and work through the system. Psychotropic medications. Psychotropic medication dispense continues to increase. Emergency room visits and outside medical appointments have increased significantly. About 30% of our AIC population suffer from persistent, serious persistent mental health issues. This is why we invest so heavily in our own mental health program and why we work with Lane County Behavioral Health's Forensic Intensive Treatment Team, the FIT team. We put a lot of emphasis in our mental health program, and we've seen a correlation in reduced behavioral incidents and a greater work environment for our staff. We continue to work to increase the number of participants in our wellness program, and we're actually working to expand a lot of what we offer in that to everybody in our facility. Things like yoga. We recognize the effects detention housing can have on people's mental health and behavior. And those of you that walk through our facility might have noticed one particularly dark area. It's one of our more restrictive housing areas. We've decided, we made a conscious decision, intentional decision, to try and transition that housing to a transitional type housing. So what we want is we want folks coming in off the street, spend a very short period of time there, and we're gonna try to get them out of there. So we want them to be able to maintain some social connection, some social interaction, better light, recognizing that damaging environment can have an effect. Now I think I'm on previous one, sorry. Future challenges and opportunities. So aligned with inflation, our costs have gone up. Simple things have gone up dramatically. Everything from gloves to toilet paper. Things we go through on a regular basis have gone up quite a bit. Some of our larger costs associated with our current population's severe acuity, those psychotropic medications, about 2/3 of our population take a psychotropic medication. Many AICs take multiple psychotropic medications. Those medications are extremely more expensive than the other medications we dispense in the facility. We're expecting a reduced revenue from the state through the Community Corrections Act and Justice Reinvestment Initiative funds. Next biennium, based on the prediction that the state is reducing the overall budget and that our percentage of that overall budget is also going to reduce. These reductions can have a pretty significant effect, not only in jail beds, but our alternative programs. Then aging building needs, our deferred maintenance, again, coming through the facility, you probably saw it's an older building. Main part of that building was built in 1978. We still have a piece of roof from 1978. That portion of the roof is actually leaking. We're working very closely with Capital, though. Capital's been a great partner in trying to address some of our issues. Working with Capital to address that. We also have some other areas. We have a 35-bed housing area that actually is returning to the earth. It's slowly sinking. Our maintenance team actually had to trim doors for those cell doors, for those doors to be able to open and shut. Not something that's ideal in a detention facility. Also with that, our basement. Like I said, Trinity Services, they provide 3 meals a day. They do laundry every day, 7 days a week. The drains, the drain pipes, the sediment traps, all that stuff is about 60% included, meaning that we're gonna have to replace those pipes soon. That's gonna be a pretty big project for us because these pipes are in the basement. They're subgrade now. We're looking for a solution to that now. We're brainstorming up ways to tackle that one in the future. All right, future capacity needs. So in 2021, we had a needs analysis done by the DLR group. The DLR group specializes in detention facilities. They're currently involved with our instruction also. They looked at our AIC population, our county population, and noted that By 2040, we need a 525-bed facility with an asterisk, that we continue to grow and develop our alternative programs at the same rate. Without alternative programs, the facility size we need would be 1,500 bed. So more than 3 times the size we have now. But with, like I said, continuing to develop our alternative programs, our work with pretrial services, which is another huge piece to that, a 1,500 jail bed facility would not fit on the current site we're at. So, thank you. I think Chief.
Quick, any questions? Obviously, the Sheriff's Office is committed to the Lane County Strategic Plan. I think we fit in pretty squarely on safe and healthy communities because we provide both the corrections and patrol aspects of, and SAR aspects of a safe and healthy community. So with that, to just save time for questions, I will say thank you for giving us the opportunity to share a little bit about our organization. Like I said in the very beginning, we're super proud of. And I'll turn it over to you. We have the experts in the room from every division to answer whatever questions you have. So,
Thank you. Questions from the committee? Yes.
You've said that, and I read in here that the Secure Rural School Funds is providing 5 deputies. Is that correct?
actually, it's providing 5 deputies, a sergeant, and 2 investigators.
Okay. And it says the funding is running out. Is that what runs out in 2025?
Yes.
Yep.
The SRS payments was last year. The funding that runs out in 2025 was granted by the board. It was a combination of reserves. It included some SRS, it included some other reserves, and it provided the 2 district deputies for the McKenzie and 2 deputies for West Lane. Those 4 were provided with reserves in the following year, which was last year. Additional SRS reserves were allocated for the 8 position ad. So we're talking about 12 positions currently that are limited duration in the effect that they're funded with set-aside reserves.
Okay, and the plan after, I'm reading in that you have phase 1 or phase 2 and 3 plan for staffing for the sheriff department.
Right.
And obviously to meet Marion County, it looks like you need a minimum of, I think, 26 is what I read. And again, it's just, how do we get there?
Yeah.
And it's the same thing I asked last year, honestly.
Yeah, and just real quick to address the phases, so that's as a part of the public safety repair plan, which is several years old now, but we continue to update it each year and provide the board through the Public Safety Coordinating Council. And so the phases initially were keep what we have, address life safety priorities, and then phase 3 was provide the services we actually want to provide. So yeah, ultimately, how do we get there? You know, that's the conversation I've been having with the community almost 40 times. Steve shared the Deschutes model in his opening budget presentation. You know, and I've been telling the community that there's 36 sheriffs in Oregon, and 35 of them are envious of the Deschutes County Sheriff because of the system they've implemented. I would love to see that happen in Lane County. Ultimately, our community has just got to recognize why we are where we are, because I think just so many folks don't recognize that Marion County's taxing at $3 a thousand, and we're not. And so the community feels like there needs to be a change in prioritization, there can always be those conversations about how do we prioritize, but I've also been trying to consistently remind the communities, the commissioners and this budget committee don't have access to the type of resources that exist in other counties. So.
Yeah, but I wanted to point out the same as, you know, when you're out talking, whether it's staffing or whatever, how do we help to do that part of it? And that's one of the reasons several years ago I wanted to be on the budget committee, because when I talk to people, I want to be able to, these are things that we really need to look at doing and to get that support behind that. I mean, that's obviously critical.
Yeah, and I just think the communication to the community is so critical, and yet I also haven't uncovered how to do it, because as I've hoped, you know, we've advertised and we've gone all over the county. And most of the time I'm talking to about 20 folks, and those 20 folks are probably already quite aware. and they chose to come anyway. So, how do we tap into the greater community and get them to want to know? And I don't know the answer yet.
Commissioner Traeger.
Thank you. Thank you for the presentation, everyone, and your work. I have a couple of questions, but Sheriff, what you just talked about made me think of a couple more. I appreciate we don't want to have a race to the bottom. We don't want to talk about sacrificing other critical services for these critical services. So there's definitely a structural fix we all need to work on after May 16th. Do you know what year, did Deschutes establish their dual district system all at once? Or if not, do you know what that timeline was? And if that's a longer conversation, we can have it some other time, but I'm just curious about that.
Yeah, I don't know.
Okay, okay. My questions, and to your point about communicating it's also, first, it's helping people let go of the assumptions they have. They're not blank slates, so there's that challenge as well. And I think there's that piece of how much of property tax dollars we actually get to keep for our own general fund in addition to how we fund these other things. So you're right, it's a big, I mean, you and I have had these conversations. Communicating with the public, it's a challenge. The curse of having too much information that we have, that we want to share that burden. I have just a couple like line item questions, and I apologize if they're deeper in here and I just didn't get to it. I'm assuming, but I don't want to assume, that the decrease, the $608,650 is the COPS grant. Is that not right? That we got and then we won't have this year, and that's why we're decreasing by that much?
Federal revenues is the one that's shown.
Yeah, in federal revenues.
Probably a combination of grant funding that we got in the federal line. I'd have to dig into that.
Okay, so
650 would be the fire.
the cameras, right. Okay.
It's
It's a mix, it is a mix.
it is a mix.
Is the detail
In the back
here?
of
I
every
didn't.
department, you have line item
Okay,
budgets.
great.
So to
I didn't
feed
see
into
that.
those, yeah, so those.
And then also remind me, the GROW, the 3-year program for the marijuana grows, is that state or federal? Okay. And then what happens to seized property? You mentioned all the cash and silver.
Yeah, oftentimes it sits for years while these cases make their way through the court process. So as an example, we once upon a time had an interagency narcotics enforcement team, multi-jurisdictional, and the sheriff's office was the fiduciary for that. The team shut down in 2017 or 18, and we resolved the final case this year. So those seized assets sat until the case was resolved. Eventually, some of them can come to the organization. There's different paths. There's federal forfeiture, there's state forfeiture, and oftentimes the cases, navigate between there. We've got great partnerships with our local federal partners, DEA, the U.S. Marshals have participated in these recent, with what you heard about today, the Marshals have participated in some of the seizure of both cash and things like tractors that were being used and unlawful manufactured. So eventually some of those assets can come to us, but it's typically a multi-year process.
Right, we can't really budget for this. And then my last question, and again, this may not be the venue for the full answer, but do we have plans for the community corrections building, and is it costing us to hold that asset mothballed?
That is a great question.
Not in the
Who
sheriff.
can help?
Yeah. It's not in the sheriff's budget anymore, right? So they're
Okay.
not, so it's like the capital fund, the
Okay.
depreciation of the building facilities. So yes, it's still a county-owned asset, so.
And just a point about, it was referenced the internal service costs, you see line items in there that I think it says county indirect charges. Actually, about 50% of those total costs are related to facilities. So either facilities maintenance or depreciation on existing facilities, as well as other services that are provided by internal agencies, but about 50% of that cost is related to facilities. We have had conversations about community corrections facility. It was a facility that was contemplated, and I think was one of the 3 locations considered for a stabilization center by the committee of folks that looked at that. So that has been considered, but was ruled out and not recommended as the primary recommendation for a number of reasons. So I'm not aware of any other uses, and it sounds like the sheriff is not at this point either.
You heard about having the DLR group come in and tell us, could we be more efficient with our current footprint, bed projection, how would we actually add beds, given we have a very limited footprint there. In fact, some of the area where our folks park is not owned by the county. And the property owner has plans to do something with that space. Anyway, one of the things DLR told us was that we could knock down the CCC building and build an additional housing unit that could be incorporated into the total footprint. I think it was 86 beds or something along those lines, for an estimated cost of $20 million, but that was a couple of years ago, so it's doubled now.
Yeah, it's at least doubled. I want to recognize we're pretty much up against time, but do you have a quick question,
Just a
Commissioner
quick,
Barr?
I'll arrange my questions, but state this, and I'll tag along with the Vice Chair Krieger's first word, and that is, we have a structural solution that we need to seek after May 16th. And on May 16th, we're going to renew the levy. That just keeps status quo. That just keeps things the way they have been for the last 7 years, 8 years. But what we need to look at is how do we provide a long-term, sustainable, permanent fix for not just the sheriff's department, but the entire system, which includes the DA's department, includes corrections, includes patrol, and patrol and probation for that matter. So we'll have to have that discussion. I think we all in this room need to really realize that that is really one of the forefront discussions that we have to have. We look at Mr. Mogravsky, the presentation you gave on Deschutes County, where it shows the fixed tax rate and the public safety tax rate, which is almost as much as that fixed tax rate. How do we get there? You say you don't know. I don't know. But together, that's a solution we have to see. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so if you didn't get a chance to ask a question, please fill out a card. We'll get it to Christine and back to the sheriff's office. Thank you so much, everybody.
Thank you very much, appreciate it.
Thanks, guys.
Be safe out there.
Oh, that's fine. 9,000.
I think we're
We only have a week.
So here's the thing.
Yes.
Lane County Jail is the mental health hospital of Lane County. It's consolidated all of the mental health nowadays.
I mean, you're right. There's so many interesting things about that, it's just, and there's nobody wants to.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
If I send somebody back, I go, shit, it's really $0.07 or so I got it. He goes, yeah, let's ask for 65.
Yeah.
Which one you have to bump it up because people will not.
To the right. It's the one. Got my sister. We always put an agenda, or if I just put it in.
Jail exists.
Find mine there. I think we got it with the last
Got it
meeting.
in the last-
Where did
oh, the
it-
last
That's what I thought.
meeting.
I just added it.
I was like, I was looking at this one.
That was it today.
I really don't read the paper anymore.
All right, let's bring us back to order. Welcome, Director Rickoff and friends.
Chair Means, thank you very much. Budget Committee, thank you for having us today. We are Community Justice Rehabilitation Services. Just a quick reminder for the board members, we were before you on March 14th, where we had a chance to talk about the progress we've made in the year since this department has been created. And I'm sorry, Budget Committee members, we will try not to speak in tongues and bring you all up to speed. Please note, Greg Rickoff, I am the director. I have with me Star Felty, who is the manager for youth services. I have Donovan Dumeyer, who's our manager of parole and probation, as well as Lynn Smith, who helps prepare the budget. We are missing Kelly Barlow, our finance and admin manager. As a rural resident of Lane County, she has had a run-in with some poison oak, and she thought to save herself and us the distraction. She with that said and done, let's jump in. Just very quickly, our job is to work with justice-involved community members and to do our best to assist them in no longer being justice-involved. We we have that specific client focus. We are partners with the gentle people who just left the room. And our exclusive purpose is to really have the focus of having enough engagement to have it be effective, and not so much that people become comfortable working within the systems, within the justice system. So our focus will cover that. It is a public safety mission focus. In terms of the budget, the two major colors that you see there really are our bread and butter. We'll be talking a little bit about the orange area, which is the state pass-through funding that provides the dollars for adult parole and probation. It is the Community Corrections Act dollars. There is some Justice Reinvestment Grant, but the majority of that CCA. The other piece there that's really critical to us, the blue chunk of the pie wedge, that is the jail levy. And we'll be talking a little bit about 35+% of the funding that goes to youth services and just how critical that jail funding is. With that, you will notice, of course, the majority of what we have is personnel. We have a department of 138 employees, almost 139 employees, a great team, and we'll be having conversations with you in the future in terms of needs as we continue to develop our programs. You will notice the materials and supplies. Last year was the first time this department existed, had a budget. And we were focused in putting that together. We really wanted to be responsible, fiscally responsible and lean. And there were things that we didn't get right. There were pieces that we forgot to include in our funding, some of the county indirect, some of our tech services indirect, and not having those included in that base budget of last year makes it a poor comparable in terms of being able to measure our growth from one year to the other. We really expected to have a 3-year launch of really correcting, getting this organized, understanding our obligations, and really building out the services that we have. So this is the second year of a 3-year initiative. With that, I'm going to turn it over to Donovan.
All right, well, thanks for having us today. So
You want to work this yourself? That's the button on the right.
Thank you. So what's, I think, most impressive about our mission, and we really are passionate in improving the quality of life, our division has really created the vision, mission, expectations, values, which really promotes buy-in and commitment from staff. So this is really staff-driven. And like I said, just a passionate group in improving the quality of life. Over the years, we've certainly geared towards specializations. And so we have several specializations that we adhere to within our supervision practices. I'd like to point out 2 of them. One is our mental health unit, which we have recently come to develop and really become really assertive and really launching strategies, effective strategies to combat mental illness that really allow us to improve the quality of life for the folks that we serve. The other initiative that I'm really proud of is our Senate Bill 416 program. This is in collaboration with the District Attorney's Office as a gatekeeper. Lane County Jail sponsors and our treatment providers, a very much a collaborative effort. And really we are able to conduct pre-sentence assessments and really address property crimes, drug crimes, and really evaluate probation versus prison. And so really looking at serving folks locally here. The program has also received a randomized control trial, which is kind of the gold standard in evaluation, and has really been an effective strategy here in Lane County to reduce recidivism. So it's certainly a program we're looking at expanding on. Our work family consists of 58 employees, all charged to improve the quality of life. Three initiatives. The Way Home Initiative. This is a really exciting work. It's in collaboration with Homes for Good and sponsors. This is a group that really is based on pushing the evidence-based envelope in support of housing. It's definitely a leader nationally. We've presented to national audiences around the country with this initiative. One of the things that we're looking at doing, at least within parole and probation, is pushing the evidence-based envelope and really developing unified case plans and really expanding our cognitive behavioral interventions. And so I promised I wouldn't talk about it, but dosage, duration, intensity, I said it. There it is. That's the focus, and it really is producing outcomes, and it's really worthy of our expansion. Another area that we're really looking at pursuing is treatment provider evaluation. Our contracted treatment providers, making sure that they're adhering to evidence-based practices. And really, what that means is fidelity to a model and a curriculum that is really driving both that cognitive and behavioral intervention piece with our client population. As of today, 3 of our 4 contracted providers have successfully passed a corrections program checklist, which is a big deal in adherence to best practices. And the 4th provider is undergoing a new curriculum and some work there, and we expect them to pass program evaluation here in the next few months. Specialized mental health unit. Currently, this is a team of 4 officers. These are really passionate folks. These are folks that really have, I think, the kind of the fortitude for this work. They take their roles in working with folks, assessing folks, really seeing people in a better place, establishing equity for a population that has traditionally been underserved, those suffering from mental illness in our county. And so this is a group of folks that is really pushing to improve the quality of life for a population that is in definite need. Of course, all 3 of these efforts have extensive partnerships and commitment and collaboration in common. We're blessed to have amazing partnerships here in Lane County. We certainly, parole and probation, can't do this work alone. Just to talk a little bit more about the 3 initiatives, the Way Home Initiative is really producing some incredible outcomes. So in 53 months, this program has served 185 high-risk clients. As of today, 91% have maintained stable housing and an 80% reduction in recidivism. This is huge for our highest risk population.
87?
80%. And in fact, I think it's higher than that now with some recent data. But these efforts are absolutely worth our consideration and duplication. And in considering our highest risk population, that statistic is amazing. It's unheard of. Treatment provider evaluation. Really at this point, we have done a lot of work in coaching, observation, and really bringing our local providers up to speed and best practices and providing services. The next step in this is really to enhance this to all major programs that are really providing the work for our client population. This is significant as treatment providers provide the bulk of dosage for our clientele, and we have to get this right. Our specialized mental health unit, again, just a specialized group of folks that are passionate about the business and really passionate in providing equity and delivering services to an underserved population. Vibrant communities. The Way Home has contributed to vibrant communities through performance-based services with clear outcomes. Oh, there it is. Clear outcomes that reduce chronic homelessness and recidivism. As it relates to a safe and healthy county, Senate Bill 497 has expanded the use of state funding to provide supervision and services for misdemeanor domestic violence convictions. It's been my experience that one's status, misdemeanor felony, really doesn't have much to do in way of risk to victims in our community. And so expanding the funding to provide services to this high-risk population is good practice, makes makes very good sense. Jail reentry. We actually currently work in close collaborations with our partners in the sheriff's office, and we have one officer assigned to the jail, and that officer works with our adults in custody to really ensure that assessments there deliver cognitive behavioral intervention to folks that are in custody, and provide some valuable transition services for folks that are needing to re-engage in the community, especially for our kind of frequent users of the jail service. And of course, our mental health unit really superbly touches on both vibrant communities and safe and healthy counties in meeting the mark and kind of bringing that, lifting that barrier and being able to address folks where they're at. Opportunities. And it's, you folks know me, I'm fairly optimistic, so it's no surprise that my opportunities list is much higher than my challenges list. But we have quite a few opportunities here in Lane County Parole and Probation. Most recently, we have experienced a reduction in caseload sizes, and this really has improved the quality. Although we're not at evidence-based standard in caseload sizes, we are certainly experiencing a reduction in caseload that allows us to be more strategic, deliberate in providing quality services for our client population. Community corrections funding for misdemeanor domestic violence cases. Again, this allows us to really expand our efforts in serving the community and really addressing high-risk need folks that are of risk of domestic violence. Strategies to combat mental illness. We're definitely pushing the evidence-based envelope and making that happen, and really combating mental illness in our client population. Really looking at opportunities to provide services to young adults, emerging adults, so that range from 18 to 25. There's science that is really pointing out that there are different risk needs for that population that need to be taken into consideration to be as effective as we can. Permanent supportive housing, still looking to, just based on the success that we've had in the way home, really looking at expanding and duplicating that effort, just again with that 80% reduction, just unheard of. And expansion of program evaluation to treatment providers, definitely a benefit in making sure that those services are solid for lasting community safety. The challenges, of course, we expect a reduction in both community corrections allocation funding and justice reinvestment, which will definitely put a pinch on funding. Housing, mental health crisis, that's an area that we are continuing to work on. And be able to provide effective, efficient, swift services for a population in need. And I also wanted to bring to our attention that Lane County currently oversees and leads the state, second to Multnomah County in high-risk supervision. So Lane County currently supervises 965 high-risk cases. This can be compared to Deschutes County, who supervises 294. Clackamas 387, Marion 478, and a runner-up to us would be Washington County at 741. So this really is and I like to refer to this as kind of an inverted triangle in risk, in that our parole and probation population really does, the bulk of our clientele are high, and the smallest population that we supervise is low risk. In many counties, it's opposite. The largest population is that low-risk population, and the fewest cases really are the high-risk cases. And so we've had an opportunity. Yeah. So that is certainly a challenge that we face. And with that, I'll turn it over to Star.
All right, I'm gonna move fast because I got a lot to cover. So if you need me to slow down, let me know. We brought a board. Each one of those cards on that board represents one type of business we do at Youth Services. So it gives you an example of how far spread we are over the public safety system and outside of it, even in the work we do.
We'll leave it here in the room, so.
Yeah, so you can take a look at it. The Youth Services Division is funded primarily through general fund and through a combination of local options levies, state dollars, federal pass-through dollars, other grants from multiple sources, foundation awards, assistance agreements, and fee-for-service contracts. In Lane County, the Youth Services is the county's juvenile department and a whole lot more. By statute, most services are provided by the division or mandated, and the division is the responsibility of the county. Youth Services is a dynamic division that is responsible for responding to the majority of law enforcement referrals for youth 12 to 17 years of age, with the exception of the formal legal processing of the most serious offenses, which the DA does. Lake County's mission, Youth Services' mission, is improving community safety and creating meaningful change for justice-involved youth, victims, and community through equitable and effective engagement. We operate 24/7, 365, have approximately, I think we have 68.8 staff, and 6 program service units, and we are housed in 3 separate buildings on the Serba Youth Campus. Our program units include administration services, which houses division planning, management, policy, legislative concerns, reports, CQI and data, grants, information systems, security oversight, hiring, recruitment, volunteers and interns, training, and division and campus operations. Our community supervision unit, this unit is divided into 3 teams. We have reception, assessment, and probation. They manage the case processing for all juvenile legal referrals and provide a full continuum of community supervision services. This includes pre-adjudicatory case processing, pretrial services, court reports, risk assessment, diversion level interventions, and formal and informal probation. Probation caseloads, specialized caseloads include human trafficking, mental health, child welfare crossover, sex offense, and a drug court treatment court program. We run a detention program. We run a detention facility. The unit oversees a 16-bed detention facility lodging youth, including youth held on adult criminal charges. Includes the administration of a medical services clinic for youth in detention in Phoenix. We run a BRS, so that's a 16-bed behavioral rehabilitation services program called Phoenix, and it provides residential level treatment services for youth at risk of escalating further into the juvenile justice system. We run a school. It's called MLK Education Center. It's a collaboration between the division and Lane Education Service District. The services provided include 3 distinct educational programs. We run MLK Alternative Education School for justice-involved community youth, including horticulture and culinary arts vocational programs. We run an education program for youth in detention. It's called the Juvenile Detention Education Program, or JDEP. And we run education for youth in Phoenix Treatment, which is long-term care and treatment program, or LTCT program. This unit also oversees community service and restitution crews. We have our last unit, which is the Nutrition Services Unit. It's a federally licensed National School Lunch Program, Oregon's licensed school nutrition program. It is a professional commercial level kitchen environment and houses the MLK Culinary Arts Vocational Program, catering services, and provides meals and snacks for MLK Ed Center youth, work group detention youth, Phoenix youth, and LCPOA staff. Our changes for 23-24, we are eliminating 2 FTEs from the community supervision unit as outlined. Additionally, we're in the process of building a new department. The establishment of CJRS has allowed for a new department administration for youth services, which has been really important, and it has necessitated a total administrative overhaul for the division. As projected during the department creation discussions, it is anticipated that it will take at least 3 years before there's any type of clear picture about what youth services administration looks like. Current projects include updating and creating administrative processes, organizing shared administrative areas. This includes things like creating lists and improving clarity in areas like budget, contracts, grants, hiring, and resource management. And those are just a few key examples of the areas we need to tackle and look into to get clear about. Primary focus has been and will continue to be ensuring an effective balance between youth services administration and CJRS administrative functions. We also have the renewal of the levy. It is, as Greg mentioned, it's over 35% of the youth services budget, so it's really important to us that that gets renewed, otherwise we're in a little bit of a bind. I have a bunch of key initiatives, and I tried to pare this down, so I'm going to move quickly through these because if I cut some of these out, then I miss some of the work of the units that I oversee. So we just have a lot going on. We participate in what's called the Performance-Based Standard Program in 3 settings: detention, Phoenix, and reentry, which is in our community supervision unit. And that we are in year 2 of a 3-year commitment for continuous quality improvement in those areas. PBS really focuses on making facilities safe, monitoring program effectiveness, and achieving positive outcomes. We are focused on reentry and transition. Reentry is critical for a time period for people who are justice involved. It's really important that that happens successfully. In the field of juvenile justice, the term associated with the services that prepare youth to successfully move into de-escalating levels of placement is called reentry. We also do this in our education area. So in the field of education, the term associated with the services that prepare youth to move successfully between types of educational settings is called transition. So we deal with both reentry and transition services. At Youth Services, reentry and transition includes transition between level of placement, so detention, residential, and community, and educational settings, JDEP, LTCT, MLK, and the school from the Youth Home District. Because of the importance of reentry and transition periods, we've spent a lot of time over the past year plus engaging in multiple projects to understand and improve services in this area. One example is in response to Senate Bill 1522, MLK was selected by the Oregon Department of Education to participate in a research study with the University of Oregon and University of Maryland on transition and reentry services. The purpose of the study is to identify strengths in the current services across the school, our juvenile services and other entities, and to find gaps in current services, assess potential challenges for the future, and learn what can be effectively used in other facilities and other settings. We have our division culture work that we've done over the past couple years. This year we worked to establish the Youth Services brand, or what we're calling our True North. It's a key part of our organizational change and health initiative, and the process has included the division's mission statement, vision statement, values, and organizational strengths. Developing all of this was really key to correcting some mission drift that had occurred within the division and ensuring a clear and inspiring understanding of why Youth Services as an organization exists, why our work matters, where we're going, and what we believe in. The development of the True North involved the use of appreciative inquiry, which is a collaborative, evidence-based, strength-based approach to organizational change. And the participants included staff, contractors, and representatives from key public safety partners to help us to figure it out. Our evidence-based practices, that's something we're really focused on as well. We want to use it not only in our practices, but in our decision-making. This has included voluntary participation in PBS, like I outlined, development of a risk-based response plan for juvenile justice system involvement, and that means that we prioritize the division's criminal justice response for youth who score as high or moderate criminogenic risk, using a validated risk assessment tool, and we divert low non-criminogenic kids from the juvenile justice system into other social systems. We are also focused on assessing and updating practices in each operational area and unit, and ensuring response, treatment approaches, and tools are validated and used to fidelity. Our division operations and sustainability. Youth Services does a number of divergent types of business, and historically that has really caused some confusion over the purpose and mission of the division. The broad range of frequently unique and often divergent areas of oversight involves ensuring service business type specific compliance in multiple and complex areas. Youth Services has initiated a deep dive into the review of the division and unit organizational structures, operations, practices, policies, and foundational principles, and staff training and development to ensure effective oversight and processes are developed for all distinct areas. We're looking to promote and prioritize youth educational engagement. The division is focused on continuing to support the development of MLK Education Center. Our current areas of focus have included transition and reentry and developing career and technical education curriculum for our vocational programs. What this means is that instead, the youth who engage in those programs are going to get core education credit as opposed to elective credits. So that's a pretty big deal for most of our kids. So we're working on that right now. And the reason this is so important is that there's research really clearly shows that criminal activity is negatively associated with level of education. So level of education really matters for our kids. We have a secure and functional detention as a goal. The security control system, including the fire alarm system within the Youth Services Detention Center, failed. Youth Services is currently in the process of working with facilities and contractors on a capital improvement project that is expected to be completed in the next year to update the failed system and return the detention to secure and functional operations. These repairs also create the opportunity for revenue generation through contracts with partners running secure custodial programs. This project represents the first significant repair since the building's construction in the late 90s. The Subaru campus buildings are all aging, and it is projected additional significant repairs will probably be needed in the near future. Criminogenic risk-driven response, as Donovan talked about, we're really focused on having our services being driven by risk The risk and need responsivity model is perhaps one of the most influential models in juvenile justice. And so having a risk-driven response is really focused on ensuring the right level of intervention and treatment is provided to each individual youth with the objective of reducing recidivism and increasing desistance, which is decreasing crime. They slowly stop doing it, so that's what we're looking for. Staff training and development. A priority for the division is to ensure staff receive initial and ongoing training specific to juvenile justice involved youth population and relevant to the staff's role. This involves an audit of all distinct operational areas and youth services, the development of onboarding and training plans for each unit in each position, and securing of education and training partners. All right, strategic plan alignment. So we cover pretty much all areas in the stuff that we're doing. Everything that's up there is stuff that I've already talked about or I'm gonna talk about next, so I'm not gonna dive deeply into this slide, but it's there for your reference. Our challenges and opportunities. One of our biggest challenges is our operational complexity. As I've already outlined, the division handles multiple complex types of business, and due to budget and funding constraints, we have had a net loss of 5 positions in the past 2 budget cycles, which is nearly a 7% reduction in FTE, while our business has remained the same. So that's pretty challenging for us. As part of the new department creation, we're really undertaking a full organizational staffing and operational assessment to identify strategies and staffing structures that better manage the division's broad scope. So, this is also an opportunity, as frequently challenges are. We have a racial and ethnic disparities response, which is really exciting. In 2019, there was a report commissioned on the racial and ethnic disparities in Lake County's juvenile justice system. In 2020, we got the completed red report with some recommendations for action. We tried to go out a couple of times for RFP, and that failed until this spring. And so finally, the RFP went through. We've identified a contractor, and we're going to be starting moving forward with the recommendations and staff trainings and engagement with the community this fall. So that's coming up soon. We have growing safety concerns on the Surbu campus. What we've seen is a continued escalation in illegal activity on the campus by high-risk adults, and it's negatively impacting our budget and our operations. Research clearly shows it's counterindicated to expose justice-involved youth to criminogenic high-risk adults. Thus, the current level of criminal activity on the campus is also detrimental to the youth who go to school there, live there, and receive services there. These ongoing issues have resulted in multiple discussions regarding how to most effectively to respond to and address this escalation with a bunch of partners. So the search for and development of effective solutions is ongoing. We're looking forward to figuring out how to best solve that problem, but it has been a challenge for us lately. I'm not going to cover the rest of the stuff because I already talked about it, but I just wanted to say that, as Lane County's Juvenile Department Youth Services is bound by Oregon statute and federal law, the potential loss of rights associated with justice system involvement and the difference between voluntary and mandated services are important distinctions between social service systems and justice systems. The creation of CJRS has ensured youth services is able to start the process of regaining clarity as a key agency in the juvenile justice system, one that has a role and responsibility in protecting constitutional rights, providing rehabilitative and restorative opportunities for youth, and supporting victim and community safety and health. So this has been a really good move for us. So we appreciate it. That's all I got. What, you already have more?
Yeah, you did great. Wow.
It go fast, otherwise it's never gonna happen.
Thank you very much for the presentation. I'll turn it over. Committee members, who has questions?
Two quick ones, because others may have. One is regarding the high risk, this increased safety concerns in the Surbu campus. Quick question on that. Do you get the help from EPD, or do you have to rely on the Sheriff's Department, or do you get no help at all?
We have, initially, we struggled with EPD, but they've been more responsive to us lately. We've kind of built that relationship. It was a strained relationship when I got here 3 years ago. And we've been able to rebuild that relationship. So we are getting more response from them, I think, than maybe some others do.
A small part of that, MLK Commons, any impact?
Yes.
Thank you, that's all I need on that. Second is, we talked earlier about a structural correction after we passed the levy in May. Youth services, 35% of your budget is on the levy. Part of the structural fix that we need, and part of what we've already talked about and what we will talk about, the public safety structural fix that we need to get involved in a very deep dive. I had more to say, but others may have more.
Commissioner Buck.
Thank you. Mr. Dumar, you, right before STAR started, you were ending with the high-risk population that you have to serve and how it's inverse from other counties. Why is that Lane County tends to get the highest risk versus
Yes.
others?
Historically, I think it's just as a result of a lack of resources within prosecution, within our courts. What tends to happen is, as the courts should, they prioritize their limited prosecution resources to the highest risk. And as a result of that, we lose out on the opportunities for early intervention in prosecution. And those folks are really, unfortunately, allowed to mature in their criminality. And so by the time they are prosecuted, they come in with high risk, high needs. And so that's really just, it's the lack of early intervention that gives us the ability. And so whereas most counties can prosecute the first or second offense, we may unfortunately no-file multiple times before somebody's actually sentenced and brought through to our charge. Yeah.
Thank you.
Anyone else?
I was waiting, I'm not sure nobody else did. Just to follow on to what Commissioner Farr talked about the stability of funding, you talked about the Measure 110 dollars being restructured. Can you remind me, or was it on there, the percentage, what that represented for your budget, the diversion of those dollars away from the services?
That was the two positions on
Yeah.
the marijuana prevention. So
Yeah.
two of the positions we lost.
So we were using Measure 110 dollars for
No, it
intervention
wasn't.
around?
It was prevention dollars that were used that were no longer available.
The
because
criminal
of-
fines?
No, this is the marijuana money.
No, I know the marijuana money.
Yeah, so that actually, Measure 110 skimmed the county's marijuana money, but they had another allocation that was not related to that they knew was going away. Yeah, that had
Measure 110
gone-
reallocated our money. to
Right.
other
Right, and that
Right,
was
that's
over
what
into
I-
the general fund, general expense.
Okay, so it didn't come directly out of your, okay, great. I have other just thoughts and questions, not for this, but it makes me think, Christine, with the opioid settlement dollars, and we just had an incredible presentation on the opioid settlement board yesterday about the value of early intervention and youth, working with youth who are currently using or at risk of
Yeah.
becoming addicted. So we should talk about that some more.
Absolutely.
Great.
Yes, please.
Yeah. Yeah, thank you, Chair. I mean, some of the things you mentioned were pretty exciting, and with that tour that we did a while back, some of the things you skimmed over very quickly was some of the upcoming capital expenditures and just the way the building's being underutilized, and perhaps maybe there's a way that it could be utilized better in the future. So
Yeah.
I'm hoping to have a more extended conversation on that, just because the design of that building is, trying to think of the correct word. It's challenging, thank you, yes. And then also, we know the HVAC system looks like something out of a Popeye movie, so it's about ready to blow at any time. So, I mean, there's a lot of challenges coming up financially that are big ticket items. And so some of the things we might be considering is, what do we do in the future that may be a major move in the right direction rather than a Band-Aid for now?
Yeah.
That's kind of what I'm excited about talking later about.
And in case we weren't clear, this is a 96-bed facility, and we are using 16 of those
Right.
96 beds.
I mean, we had discussed just the utility costs alone of heating and cooling that entire building when we're not using it was about $250,000 a year.
Yeah, there's a lot of opportunity on that campus to,
Yeah.
but it takes an investment to get there.
Takes money to make money, that's always the thought.
That is very true on that campus, strategic decisions, and that's one of the things we've really focused on, is how to do the most with what we have, what we can move, what we can do, how do we effectively manage such a broad scope, because the undermanagement of this has led to a lot of the problems that we're seeing now and the ineffective use of resources, so we're trying to figure out how to problem solve that.
I'm going to put myself in the queue. So I'm looking at the budget, parole and probation, Donovan, under state revenues. I'm just curious, the fiscal year 23-24 proposed has 12.7 and change. Is that what you expect to receive from the state? Or is that what we want to receive, but likely not to receive?
Yes, that's what we hope to receive, but we know that, just given the percentage and the reduction of our population, that's probably not our reality. We'll see though.
We have a team valiantly working towards that in Salem.
I'm certain of that.
Well, I appreciate you asking this question, Chair, because we had a lot of discussion both with the Sheriff's Office that receives Community Corrections Act state funding and parole and probation that receives those funds. And typically what we do each year is we budget the amount of state CCA dollars that we expect based on, the dynamics of the time and the population we're serving and what the state is funding. What that does then is it effectively solves the problem without ever really talking about how the state continues to reduce.
Right.
So in consultation with our Community Justice Rehabilitation Service Department and the Sheriff's Office, we all felt like it was appropriate, but we wanted to be transparent in saying, yes, we're budgeting what we need from the state in CCA dollars, expecting that it's certainly possible, if not probable, that it's going to come in less than that, and we will have to come back to the Board of Commissioners when we know that, which is likely in June. It'll be after this process.
Sine dies June 20-something, so.
Right, so it may even be after adoption of this budget and in a supplemental to say, okay, here's the revenue we actually got from the state, now we have to reconcile these budgets and here's what the impacts will be. But we felt like really the public transparency of that conversation so that everyone understands the impact of receiving less resources from CCA than we need is really challenging on these services. So thank you for asking the question. I think it's really, we can talk about that with the sheriff as much, but I think it's important for you all to understand.
I think it's really important to elevate that message that, state resources are continuing to drop as mandates are continuing to increase. Yeah.
It's a thing.
It's a thing.
Well, and can I just make one other comment?
Please do.
There are, is Lynn County, what's the other county?
Douglas.
Is it Douglas and Lynn?
Yeah.
Douglas and Lynn County both, what is the term?
Opted out.
Opted out
Years ago.
of providing parole and probation services locally. It's a state mandated service. That is an option. I will tell you, having worked in counties where the state runs a parole and probation and working here, and you see, hopefully, I think we all see the quality of services and the care that is being taken and impact on our community from a public safety standpoint when, the government closest to the people governs best, right? I mean, that's my view at least. And so we don't want to give up this service to the state because we don't believe that the state would actually provide a better level of service. We think there'd be a degradation in service. But that is something that 2 counties in Oregon have taken advantage of, is essentially just said, well, here you go, state, you take it and you run that service.
Thank you. Commissioner Farr, did you have something?
Just ever so briefly regarding the Silbury campus, we've tried over and over again to identify ways to use some of the space, including Steve Mokrohysky helped us dig deeply into could we provide a youth crisis center at the Silbury campus. And it is such a bad design, that's all.
Opportunities for improvement.
Thank you, and with the last comment, please do take a look at this. The depth and breadth of programming that goes on within the Youth Services Division is really quite extraordinary. I mean, it's our only principal superintendent who has the grand title of supervisor, running education programs in detention in Phoenix as well as in the school itself. I mean, we have a remarkably rich and diverse programming going on.
Yeah, we have a pretty compacted administration, so usually you'd have a detention manager, right, and managers over these areas, and we just don't have that here. So, we're doing a lot with a little, and we're doing a good job.
Somebody's doing an extraordinary job.
My staff are good.
Well, we are right on time. Thank you so much for the presentation. It's much appreciated.
Thank you. Appreciate your time today.
And we are on break for 10 minutes.
And there are snacks.
Attorney Perlow for being here. We'll turn the floor over to you.
Thank you. Please call me Patty. I don't know how this works.
To the right.
So this is the department overview. The district attorney's office, what you primarily think of as criminal prosecution, which is the processing of criminal cases referred to us from law enforcement, from intake to disposition. So that's mostly what we do. We try to improve public safety and quality of life by prosecuting the guilty, protecting the innocent, and then we also have, protecting the innocent includes victim services. Victims have constitutional and statutory rights in Oregon, and it's our job to enforce those. Securing appropriate support for children and families, we have a child support enforcement division, also known as family law, and determining cause and manner of death in all cases of traumatic or unattended death, that would be the death investigators. It's a very long mission statement. Here are our budget details. This does not reflect the general fund. That 50% federal revenue is grant money. It's not that we're 50% funded by the federal government. These are our grants. Discovery is when we prepare all of the police reports and video evidence and everything for a criminal defendant. We recoup those costs. Here are our budget details. In personnel, you heard Tuesday night that we're seeking 2 additional positions. That is not in criminal prosecution, that's in death investigations. Because of the number of overdose deaths, suicides, car crashes, and everything else that's happening here, and the population growing, the number of people dying each year is increasing dramatically. In 2010, we were barely at 1,000 people a year that the office had to investigate. Now we're pushing for 1,800 a year. And we currently have 4 investigators and no administrative support for that. So if you do the math and divide 1,800 by 4 people, that's a lot per day. And administrative support, the goal is to be able to get at the front end of this and maybe do some work with public health to look at trends. We don't have any real-time data to work with them, so the administrative assistant would be able to do data entry and help work with data analytics for public health to see if we can get ahead of some of this. I know, I'm sorry. All of these other costs are increasing. We have investigators, the death investigators, and law enforcement investigators who all have vehicles. Those costs are going up. PC replacement, we've been underfunded, countywide indirect, all of that. But the other costs are holding steady. All right, so here's the wine session. We have 30 lawyers in the budget, and one of them is the liaison for the Oregon District Attorneys Association that's funded by the state legislature. I have 4 lawyers in family law. I have 1 lawyer at juvenile and 1 lawyer who handles all the treatment courts. And so in criminal prosecution, that leaves 23 people to do all of the work. About 4,000 cases get referred a year. They all have to be reviewed, and I have 5 vacancies and somebody who's been on medical leave. So thank you to the commissioners for changing the salary scale so that I have only lost 1 lawyer this year.
Hey.
And I have a new one starting on May 15th and another one who's graduating May 20th, starting in August after the bar exam. These are our teams. We have a major crimes team made up of 5 lawyers who do all of the violent crime. Child sex cases is the bulk of the work they do because we've had so much violent crime that the rest of it's getting distributed to the general felony team. We have a lot of homicides pending. We have a domestic violence team. It's reduced to 4 lawyers because of the vacancies in there. A general felony team, we used to have 3 general felony teams, now we have 1, and it's down to 4 people. The misdemeanor team is a supervisor and 2 lawyers right now. The attorney assigned to juvenile, and then the one assigned to treatment courts. There's a treatment court graduation tomorrow at 1 in Harris Hall. If you're not doing budget-related things and you're available, it will be quite inspiring. We have 3 investigators. 1 is grant-funded for family law, 1 is grant-funded for domestic violence investigations. One of them used to be grant-funded for traffic crimes, car crashes, is collision trained. It was grant-funded. The grant ran out, and the board has continued to fund that position. I'm going to be coming to the board seeking a recognition for our traffic investigator because he has served so many warrants for people who haven't shown up to court on their, driving under the influence is more dangerous to the public than a person with 1 weapon in one scene. I mean, everywhere that person goes, there's a potential death scene. He has performed traffic stops whenever he sees somebody driving over 100 miles an hour and cutting through or driving up the right shoulder. So he has earned his keep. We have a lot of tasks that aren't related to criminal prosecution, including public record appeals. If some government agency denies access to public records, it's our job to review the appeal, sort of in a quasi-judicial function. The legislature has given us the gift of expanded expungements, set-asides of criminal convictions with no additional resources. Senate Bill 819 reviews are the people who are currently in the prison asking to have their sentence reviewed. That would we consider a reduction in sentence given how they've performed in the prison. There have been a lot of those, and I just had a voicemail message from someone who was very happy that it's being granted. And then other various motions. We review all the search warrants for law enforcement, and that has increased dramatically as case law has changed. You no longer have a vehicle exception. If you stop a vehicle, a mobile vehicle, you used to be able to search it if you had probable cause at that time. Now you have to get a search warrant. All of those warrants have to be reviewed before it goes to a judge. We do training for our staff and for law enforcement, and then we have the retrial of all the cases that have been referred back because they didn't have unanimous juries. When that case was decided by the United States Supreme Court, it wasn't retroactive, but the Chief Justice of the Oregon Supreme Court and 2 of her retiring friends on their last day of service said, yep, all of it's retroactive, all of those cases are going back to the DA's office. So, from the beginning of time, death investigations is any unexplained or unattended death. And what we have been seeing most recently are an uptick, dramatic, in overdose deaths, probably correlated to the passage of ballot measure 110, the decriminalization of hard drugs in our communities. And so lots of people are getting fentanyl in their drugs. Fentanyl is a drug of choice of a large number of people in our treatment court. But people who aren't expecting it are overdosing as a result of it. We've had an uptick in suicides, particularly since COVID. Mental health seems to be really precarious in a lot of our population, a lot of young people and seniors. So we have these death investigators who triage whether they're going to go to the scene or not. And if they're going out to the scene, they do an external exam of the body, take toxicology, pull fluid from eyeballs and bladders, and do all the things, and then try to help the state pathologist determine cause and manner of death. And they also investigate found bones. That actually happens now and again, that they'll find some bones out in the woods, some hunter or campers will find, hikers will find. We just had want to say it in a public meeting. But it's exciting science.
Can we ask questions now?
Yeah, I know. We've been audio recess for about 12 seconds.
So here's some more whining. I mean, that's the truth of it. People are buried. We have still a backlog of cases from COVID, plus the new cases coming in, with every lawyer who has left, which I think was 11 over the course of about 18 months. Their caseload was passed on to other people. And so we had to institute a no-file list again, which was something I was so proud to not have when I started as the DA. And so it's bad for the community to not have those cases filed. We recognize that. We are striving to get people hired and up to speed so that we can eliminate that. But with the cases coming back from the appellate courts, the work is really grinding and grueling. And so it's not really a surprise that people are burning out. And that's the 21% increase in death in Lane County is why we're asking for the additional help. The Family Law Division is full, well, we just had one person resign, but we were fully staffed for a brief period of time. They collect, normally have been collecting about $20 million a year for Lane County kids. This last year, it was $17 million, and nationwide, that has been a trend, that not as many people have been seeking the enforcement of their judgments. And so there is a nationwide effort to make the public aware that you have a right to these services, that they are provided, and that so more outreach is going to be happening to try to increase that collection. It's not that we aren't there and ready to do the work and trained up, and we've got the investigator who goes out and makes individual contact with the people who haven't been showing up to court. But we will continue to watch that. This is really a great program for investment from the county, because we get 66% back from the federal government plus incentives for every dollar spent in that program. And it does such a great job of, that team does such a great job of collecting child support for kids to make sure that they have clothes and shoes and school supplies and the basic needs of life. That's addressing the concerns nationwide about families not taking advantage of the services. But I think from the state and local level, well, from a national, state, and local level, we will continue outreach to make sure families know that they can take advantage of having those judgments enforced. The Support Services Division includes our clerical staff and victim services. As I mentioned, victims in Oregon have constitutional and statutory rights, that it's our obligation to make sure they know about those rights and to try to enforce those rights, including victim notifications of proceedings, restitution, documentation, filing for protective orders, all of the things. Just as an interesting side note, it came to my attention that DYS has a reduction in staff, and it turns out one of those positions is the victim advocate out at juvenile. So Lori Solano is the director of victim services in my office, and so we had a volunteer out there retire recently too. So Lori's been trying to provide the services that are constitutionally mandated, and we're going to hire an extra help person to come in until we see. It's not on this slide. No. the legislature, the Oregon District Attorneys Association had a policy option package that included the funding of victim advocates in district attorneys' offices. And that bill is actually still alive, and it's at Ways and Means. So it provides that for every 4 prosecutors in an office, there would be 1 victim advocate. And so that would help free up resources from the general fund. A lot of what we do is grant funded in victim services, and that would allow for my coming back and asking for a position in juvenile to make sure that those victims' rights are enforced. So more to come on that one. I'm just hopeful that that will stay alive. The clerical staff processes everything that comes through the office. There is nothing that we can do in the criminal division without that net of the person who opens the file to providing the discovery to the defense, which is constitutionally and statutorily mandated, tracking the dockets, making outreach to other states and counties for criminal convictions, providing support for subpoenas and grand jury, all of the things. The clerical staff is, we would fail without that support. There is no position that's not important. No changes, oh, here it is. That's the funding piece in victim services, really looking forward to having some state support. The state has reneged on all of the investment in district attorneys' offices that they once made. Oh, and that's talking about the set-asides. I have a paralegal. I was so excited when the board funded some paralegal positions in my office so that that could help support the lawyers. One of them, the only thing she can do are these set-asides. We had 1,400 of them last year. I mean, that's her full-time job, plus a retired lawyer comes in and reviews the work and signs the documents. It's just no support from the state on things like that. And the same thing for the court. The court is having to process those 1,400 with no additional resources. Yeah, let me turn the person. Yeah. It just seems like every year the job gets a little bit harder. All right. Our key initiatives are to make sure that we are fulfilling our obligation to serve 100% of victims through victim services, to increase our involvement, the number of people who are getting referred into our specialty courts. The treatment courts include the drug treatment court, the veterans court, the mental health court. I wanted a DUI court. I've been advocating for a DUI court for almost 8 years now, and the court has been resistant to adding another docket. But that's another proven way of keeping our highways safer. And our 416 program is a completely counterintuitive name for a program. Senate Bill 416 didn't pass, but we still call it our 416 program. And it is a downward departure, diversion from prison program. It is in conjunction with sponsors, the sheriff's office, and I'm just going to call it parole and probation because the big name of that department is hard to remember. And what we've seen is the recidivism rates are dramatically better than those in the rest of the state or regular probation for that program, as well as our specialty courts. And finally, the collection of child support. I mean, that is really important to support kids in this community, and it's a terrific program, and to make sure that every family who needs that assistance from us is having access to it. I wasn't supposed to use this slide, but it helps me remember what the strategic plan specifics are and how we fit into it. So even though the budget office was not really happy with me for saying I want to use this slide, I just have to, because it helps me have a visual of where we fit into all of this. And And it is particularly a safe and healthy county for the work that we do in prosecuting people who are committing crimes in our community and trying to get ahead of why so many people are dying in our community, taking care of the victims of crime, trying to empower people to get out of the criminal justice system for vibrant communities. I'm not going to talk about the courthouse. If you haven't been in the courthouse, please do. And recruiting, hiring, retaining employees who want to do this work. And I got to say, I've been in the law school to talk to the first-year law students for the last few years. And if you can catch them early enough and talk to them about how great this job is, then you can counter all of the negative that they get from the law school about prosecution being evil. So we've had started a 1L intern program. 1L is first-year law student. They're done. They come in and they spend the summer with us. Just a few students can go back and say, wow, what a great experience. Take the prosecution clinic in law school, and that's where we're going to do our recruiting. Once we get fully staffed with people who are as passionate about this work as I am, we won't have a no-file list. And partnering with agencies to improve outcomes. I can't do anything about the legislature. I don't know. It's just, and the appellate courts just constantly pounding on the work we do. And, you know, in a sports analogy, they just keep moving the goalposts. So we do the work under the rules as they have always been, and then get told, nope, changing everything. Something that's been in effect for 50 years, all of a sudden is not the law anymore. And yeah, I am going to whine a little bit about office space because if I'm fully staffed, we still are going to be behind the 8 ball, and there's no place to put anybody else. I could use more help in the criminal division. Death investigators moved over to really nice space right here. But the criminal division is housed in the courthouse, and it's not very good. Questions?
All right, thank you. Questions from the committee? Yes.
Just to make sure I have my terminology correct, the no-file list would be a list of offenses that the office decides they're not going to do anything with? Is that the correct definition of that?
That would be a great definition, but there are so many exceptions. We have crime classifications that are primarily no-file unless. So if somebody is committing multiple offenses and keeps accumulating files, then this is what we did before the 416 program. We would just let people amass big criminal histories and then send them to prison. So we are targeting the people who are having the greatest impact on the community. And some of that includes crimes that would be on a no-file list if we had a no-file list. It's also that the misdemeanor team is down to 2 people. And so DUIs and person crimes that are misdemeanors are our priority, and anything else is probably not going to get filed until we get more people on the misdemeanor team.
And then when you referred to, when you were talking about the clerical support and activities, you talked about set-asides? What were we talking about?
So
at that
that's
point?
sealing your criminal conviction. So somebody gets convicted of theft, and now 3 years later they can come in and get that. But they're not just getting their most recent conviction. They can get all of their convictions. They're each filed as a separate motion. It requires it takes time, and nobody was funded for this. You have to go through the state police to find out criminal history and fingerprint cards and all of that. And with the volume that's gone up, they didn't get any funding. So everything is, and there's timelines. I mean, we are required to get this processed in a set amount of time with no resources.
And then just to circle around on the 110 impacts. So there, I think what you're saying is there's 110 cost impact, right? You're having an increased cost due to 110, and in your department, there's no revenue or no additional support that comes in that would be associated with 110.
Well, I think that I'm hoping that somebody's looking into whether there is revenue available to address the overdoses and the overdose deaths that we're seeing as a result of 110. But as for the increase in victimization of our community, because drugs aren't free, they're decriminalized, but they still cost money. And people in the throes of addiction are desperate to get them, and so they will commit crimes in order to get them. They also commit crimes because they are completely out of their mind. The drugs that we're seeing now are not the same as the drugs of 20 years ago. People their brains are physically altered by the drugs that they're using. I mean, you would have an impact from using a lot of drugs over the years, but this is a level of insanity, for lack of a better term, that is huge and lasting.
It takes much longer to clear fentanyl from the system than anything else.
Well, and there was an article, an interview with somebody who has been a long-term drug user in Portland, and he was talking about methamphetamine is not the same as it was when he first started using, and that his brain is forever altered. It's not just getting it out of your system. Yeah.
What are we seeing for the effects of SB 819?
We get a lot of requests. There are some specific guidelines that are on the website for what it takes to qualify, and but we are getting a lot of requests for resentencing or dismissal of a prior conviction because it doesn't qualify for a set-aside. And so
So set aside's different than?
set aside is different from, an 819 is, I'm in prison and I want to be resentenced to something lesser than the sentence I received. And in some circumstances, I mean, we've done several of those because prior to the 416 program, we were letting people amass these huge criminal histories, and people were getting sent to prison on property cases for more time than you would for a murder. So it's appropriate to go back and look at some of those circumstances and how people have changed while they've been in custody. And we make them outline, what's your plan? If you get out of prison, what's your plan? Where are you going to live? What are you going to do? Who are your resources, your contacts here? And they present that. We check to make sure that's all true, that those resources and stabilities are available for them, and then file a stipulated judgment in the court, changing the sentence.
Yes.
Yeah, DA Perla, you said that, I mean, the tone I got from some of the ways you described the job and what it does and takes the toll on the individual, I was reminded about what the sheriff's office said when they had a program, a wellness program that hit the 4 pillars of spiritual, physical, emotional, and financial. And I'm wondering if the DA's office has anything like that in play or plans to.
We do putt-putt golf and pizza once a year and bring in chair massages once a year. But other than that, no, we do not have.
Is that necessary in your opinion?
Well, I can tell you that a number of people avail themselves of our great medical benefits for therapy. And a number of people don't want anything to do with any of it. And they won't even come play putt-putt golf and eat pizza.
Wow.
Commissioner Burke.
You know, DA Perlo, regarding child support, you indicated that it's a resource that is available to us, that the federal government reimburses 60% of the, or provides 60% of the assistance. We don't need to hear more about that at this point in time. That's something that we need to look at, I think, for the future, because everybody benefits from the increased child support. You talked about the $20 million 2 years ago down to $17 million. That's a chunk of money that's not going to reset diapers and food and transportation to school and childcare and things that is intended to go to. So if you can put together some program on that to help us as the Board of County Commissioners, that subsequent budget to help you move forward with that. I think I know you think about it continually, because you and I have talked about it a number of different times. But you hear it in front of the budget committee. You hear about all these kids who are entitled to the child support and they're not getting it. And we have the potential to provide more resources to direct money directly back to the families from from the sources that it's intended to come from.
Right.
Thank you. That's chilling.
Any other questions?
Sorry, this isn't really a budget. I just want to go on the record. I fully appreciate and greatly respect your experience, but I also think we have to be careful with the overdose epidemic to overemphasize the Measure 110 impact on overdose deaths, because fentanyl in the drug stream, other drugs being cut with fentanyl is the leading cause of the overdose deaths, and that would be true whether that's in addition or also sort of a little to the side of 110. So I just think it's just more complex than saying that Measure 110 is driving the increased overdose deaths. It's certainly driving increased addiction rates, I think.
Which increases your risk of overdose.
It does. But it's just a subtle but important difference that then leaves us out of the conversations we need to have, I think.
There are lots of conversations that need to be had.
You're not the first person to cite those statistics. That's that can be a lot of different sources. So, thanks for that. If I may just add one more thing. What is it? House Bill 2391 is in ways and means right now. That's the 1 to 4 on services. We hope it goes through, and if it does go through, it's $25 million that they're going to get from where. But that being said, if it does go through, we hope that they don't cut the funding and keep the program, which is from the state. They do the funding initially, and then keep the attorney and then take the funding away.
Right. That's what happened with the Justice Reinvestment money, is that we started all these programs, the cost of the programs continues to rise, and the amount of money that they're providing continues to go down.
But it helped having Charlie Conrad on House Judiciary, didn't it?
He writes me every day.
Okay, I think that's all. Last call. Great. Thank you very much.
Thank you, and you know where to find me if you have additional questions.
Thank you. So we are ahead of schedule.
And you're welcome.
Yeah.
I saw you, but I don't, so you could take a quick break then, I think for continuous.
They're down there, he was gonna send them down. Just
Yeah,
let you
I
know.
don't see them yet.
He said as soon as she was done, he would send them.
Okay, can we
just get them.
hang tight just for a minute? I'd hate to take 10 minutes
Send
and.
them down, please,
Yeah.
Get it going.
They're on their way.
Get it going.
Yes, let's just go.
She's on the way.
Presenting them in a spreadsheet in a way, I mean, the ones that officers leave out, right? Just to really see, like, these are the
I know what they're
ones.
doing on the public defender side, but that's really not hers.
Which, in which category?
And that's not hers.
We can add it to our.
She probably
Because
does.
I keep flipping back and forth and trying to remember which was the one and where.
Good, thank you very
and which was
much.
it to the discretionary or best community?
Yeah.
Just having like a snapshot of all the leverage funds in that, you know.
Yeah, that's a good idea, we can easily add that.
I was thinking about that for, it might be something we look at I know on the 11th, we have some trouble with the agenda. And I just wondered if that would be useful. It's just, it's.
What?
Right, that's why we added it so many years ago.
Yeah, but I just realized that all the
Yes,
flipping back
there's
and forth, and because there's 3 different ways it can happen.
Right, absolutely, yeah.
And I'm always reminded when we talk about child support collection.
I know what you do.
And also, I mean, you know,
Yeah. Yeah, that would.
Great. Do I need a card? Do I need to do a card?
Right now, they're like, you know, this far up the list.
Yeah, it's actually, yes, it is.
I got a letter on file. She goes, I'm sorry.
You could even pull it towards you if you want to. I know it feels like it's right in your face.
I'm gonna add it to the side. I'm gonna do this because I speak so loudly.
Interesting to see.
And I'm also just here as figurehead, actually. I'm just gonna introduce people who actually know what they're doing.
Until they can become rewarded.
All right, well, thank you very much for being here, Director Gray. I'll turn the floor over to you.
Thank you. Oh, I guess this is here. I should put it up. I'm Eve Gray. And I'm here to talk about behavioral health, which is the one division of Health and Human Services that is categorized as public safety. So you will hear about that one division today and the rest of our operational divisions next week. So I really, and now where's the clicker is here.
You get to do that.
Look at that. So here is the basic structure of Health and Human Services, which I think most of you are familiar with. And you will hear from also the Community Health Centers, Human Services, Public Health and Developmental Disabilities. We do not currently have admin, clinical, financial services, or quality and compliance scheduled. So just calling that out since there is an opportunity for additional requests if you desire to do so. And now I will turn it over to Zach Evans, who is our admin and finance manager. Even though he's not going to talk about his own division, he's going to tell you about all the other ones. And then Pauline Gishohi will do the programmatic overview.
Thank you, Eve. So with behavioral health coming into 23-24 as proposed, state and federal revenue are about 83% of the proposed budget, with fees and charges being about 14%. And the fees and charges, just for everybody's reference, that's what we bill out to Trillium, Pacific Source, and kind of other third-party fees for their activities in the federally qualified health centers. And with that, general fund, I'm pretty sure it's been a hot topic today as well as on Tuesday. There is some general fund support for commitment investigations, about $611,000. And that is very well articulated in our SOS form, if you haven't had the opportunity to read that yet. So, I'm going to do that. I'm not used to clickers, which button is that?
Yeah.
So with that in personnel budgets are going up. The cost of doing business next year, I'm sure it's been a theme throughout today, as well will be next week. And we're looking at M&S budgets being flat. So even with the growth in kind of personnel, able to hold steady on the M&S pieces. The capital expense is a purchase where we got OHA funding to purchase some vehicles for outreach in, I believe, South Lane County. Any questions so far on the budget info? I know that there was a lot in the document with some changes. If you'd like me to highlight those now, I can. If not, I can wait to the end.
Go ahead and we'll ask our questions at the end. Thank you.
You want to do the
Ish,
clicker?
absolutely.
Because if I touch it, something wrong. All right, so again, I'm Pauline Gishohi. I'm the Behavioral Health Division Manager for the county. And I'll go through these slides fairly quickly, high level, and if you have any questions programmatically, I can answer those too. So as far as the programs under the behavioral health, we have the adult outpatient, we have the child and adolescent program, all operating out of the MLK campus. And with the child team, we also have 3 satellite clinics that are out of Churchill, North Eugene, and Springfield High School. So we have clinicians stationed there a few days a week just to kind of help the schools with upcoming issues that they're seeing. So they get referrals from the schools and address those issues in the schools. Just to be candid, we are getting a lot of requests from other schools to do something similar, just with the upcoming needs in our schools. But so far, those are the only 3 satellite clinics that we have.
We also have a bigger bucket that we call forensics services. So the forensic services are folks mostly involved in the criminal justice system. So we have a civil commitment, we have a aid and assist, often referred to as the 370. So the 370 are people who are not able to aid in their defense, though they are under treatment to regain competency to stand trial. And then we have PSRB, those are people who are found guilty except for insanity. So we do have quite a number of them that are stable enough to be in a community setting. So we are providing that oversight on behalf of the PSRB, the Psychiatric Review Board, which is the equivalent of parole, probation on the mental health side. So we provide mental health assistance, assessment as needed, and just kind of be that oversight entity that is delegated by the PSRB. And then I'm trying to remember if there's any other jurisdiction under forensic. I think those are the main ones. So those are really truly the folks involved in the criminal justice system. We also have a few folks involved in the community courts. So also have clinicians who are doing that type of jail diversion, folks who are maybe at risk of committing crimes. So we see those in community courts as well. And then they are attached to the outpatient clinic where they get their mental health services. So under the umbrella of our behavioral health is also the treatment centers, the Lane County Treatment Centers. Most of you know it as the medication-assisted treatment program. We have both methadone treatment and buprenorphine that we are also trying to expand due to the demand for those services in our community. So we also have another bucket of mental health crisis outreach work, trying to get to, that's the other forensic that I wasn't talking about. So we have, under the outreach services, we're trying to reach people wherever they are. So there are a majority of our clientele that are not able or not willing to come to the traditional brick and mortar treatment. So we are taking treatment to them, and they may often be involved in the criminal justice system, or sometimes not, but they're not trusting us enough to come to our clinics. So we're taking services to them. So one of those is our forensic intensive treatment team that is boots on the ground, connecting with people. It's a fidelity model that is really truly criminal justice based, and they're trying to engage with folks to eventually get them into treatment. So what they're doing for a number of months before people start to engage is really building rapport and just being there, repeatedly showing up, and just being present with those clients, and eventually connecting them to services. This is a program that we launched, or we tried to launch during COVID, so it didn't quite take off. Now is when we are seeing some of the really significant impacts of having a team, boots on the ground, and trying to engage with these folks. It's an amazing team. So we are trying to expand some of those outreach services. It's kind of my goal of getting before people are in crisis, so kind of thinking about prevention work. So this is kind of getting us to be more proactive, being out there and really catching people before they are in crisis. And lastly, under that umbrella is the adult protective services. So we do the abuse investigations of potential neglect and abuse for folks who are involved in our services. So we have a team of 3 that carries those investigations on behalf of the state. The other side for our programs are the community systems, which used to be Lane Care. So Lane Care used to be its own division now under behavioral health. And these are staff that are embedded both with the two CCOs, so Trillium and Pacific Source, and they carry activities, tasks, case management, system-wide services on behalf of the CCOs. And they have, the two teams embedded in these two CCUs, and then we have a program that is funded through the state called Choice, and these are high complex individuals that need wraparound services. So the Choice is a funding source that is providing those wraparound services for our very complex individuals. And under that also we have the older adult behavioral health that started about, I want to say about 5-6 years ago. So it's a new initiative, again, just being very focused on the older adults within behavioral health. And then we have the system of care wraparound. So it's just a convener, so bringing systems together, trying to identify needs, gaps in the system. So this team kind of does a lot of that system wraparound work. Next slide, please. So what do we anticipate to have as changes in the coming year? Our biggest one is mobile crisis responses expansion. That's a big one in our community. I think I've mentioned that every year that I've been here, that it's something we want to do. So actually now we are in the pre-implementation stage, and this is being accelerated by the state because there are now new rules and guidelines for the mobile crisis response. So this is being informed by the SAMHSA Crisis Now model that the state has adopted. So the SAMHSA's Crisis Now model has 3 legs. It's a place to call, people that can reach out to you, and a place for you to go when you're in a mental health distress. And mobile crisis is one of those pieces. So we are behind a little bit on the curve of having a comprehensive mobile crisis response in our county. We've been doing pretty well in the metro areas. We started pilot projects in the rural community, in one rural community, Western Lane, but we have not expanded the mobile crisis to the entire county. So now we are being really pushed to make sure that that is accessible and available to anybody in our county that is in a behavioral health distress. So that's going to be a focus. We are currently engaged with community partners, stakeholders, to kind of come up with a design model of what that's going to look like in our county. Of course, looking at the new guidelines that the state has already put forth as the new guidelines for this work. We are also looking at ways to support housing programs. This is also a gap and a need that has come up in the last 2 years or so, where we have these budding programs that are really in need of mental health outside. So it's congregate folks that congregate housing for people who are unhoused. But once they get into housing, there's all these needs that they bring with them, one of which is behavioral health services. And while we've been trying to do Band-Aids to send outreach workers to these sites, it's not enough. They need somebody there who can respond, who can be available as things are escalating, to help kind of calm people down and just make sure that they are doing okay. So we're trying to enhance that as much as possible to our partners in residential and other housing sites. And the other one is increasing coordination with outreach services with our HNHS divisions. There's a lot of us that are trying to do outreach work because it's that identified need. But I think the more we can coordinate those outreach teams versus having siloed team. So I have a behavioral health outreach team. Housing has their housing, outreach team. Public health has their own housing outreach team. If we can coordinate those to where we have a team that comprises of somebody from public health, somebody from behavioral health, we can catch that in a more coordinated way. So we're trying to do more of this in the next year, figuring how that could be better streamlined, and I think it will be better care for the people that we are all trying to serve. So the key initiatives, it's that developing that comprehensive continuum of psychiatric care, borrowing from the SAMHSA model. So I talked about the mobile crisis, which is going full. We're involved in the early implementation stages. The other piece is the Crisis Stabilization Center, that is a part of this, the continuum that has been, work that has been happening, looking to implement that. It's a lot of parallel processes that we are working on to build that continuum. So we can have a very robust, system in one area, but if we don't have that built out continuum, psychiatric continuum care, all these other systems are not gonna be successful. So it's looking at all that from having somebody in crisis get help to having them be in recovery, in housing, in residential, and being able to maintain for longer periods of time, versus what we are seeing is people just cycling through the system because there's not really any place for them to land based on the system that we have currently. So borrowing from the Lane County Strategic Plan and what we are trying to develop and ongoing is the stabilization center that I mentioned. So there's more ongoing work happening there. We just met today with potential funders and just did a presentation hoping that we'll get funding to bring the stabilization center online. Then a focus on our people. We've been focusing on improving onboarding and improving on our hiring system, so being able to be more faster in terms of our recruiting, so we don't lose people in the wait. So looking at how we can do that. Also looking at ways to retain people once we get them. So a lot of efforts to look at wellness opportunities, ways to just make people feel like they belong, they are doing valuable work. So that's ongoing. And then in promoting integration and clinical access, so looking at the whole person, so integrating with primary care, which we have been doing for a number of years, strengthening those collaborations with public safety, housing, and other services, because all of us touch these people at some point. So having that coordinated care and ability to share information with each other, that has been another big barrier around HIPAA and how do we share. But again, it's looking at, is this doing more harm than good if we cannot coordinate care with everybody that is involved in service delivery. And lastly is looking at sustaining the infrastructure as a CMHP. So we are the delegated community mental health authority. Actually, I should go back a little. So the commissioners are the delegated authority from the state. I'm taking a lot of authority. And then that's delegated to the CMHP. So we are coordinating the access and service delivery, mental health delivery for the county. So it's looking at how do we do that. So we partner with a lot of community partners in doing this work. So how do we coordinate it? Is there oversight? What are the gaps? What's missing? So it's looking at that infrastructure that's going to help us do this work better. So challenges and opportunities, our biggest challenge, as you all know, is workforce. We can barely hire people, and we also struggle with retention, to be honest. There's a lot of burnout in this work. So it seems like we are constantly hiring and constantly having to figure out different ways on how to retain people. So that's an ongoing challenge. So engaged in looking at ways to build that pipeline, and just figuring different ways on how to do to entice people to come to behavioral health. It's hard work. It doesn't necessarily always pay well. So it's looking at other different ways of how we can entice people to come to behavioral health. So we are continually seeing an increase in demand for services, and especially in the last few years with the pandemic, a lot of the people that we are serving are people who've never been in the mental health system before. So people who are just barely managing it but doing okay, now all of a sudden are really in need of support and services. So with the workforce challenges, the demand is such that we don't have capacity to meet everybody that is looking for services. And then the other challenge is the acuity. I think I said this last year too. We're serving a lot of very, very ill people. And I think the challenge is, all that continuum of care that I talked about. If one system is compromised, it tends to have a trickle effect downstream. So that's what we are seeing. And with the backlog at the state hospital, where a lot of this acuity was, we are having to deal with that acuity at the community level. So that's really a big need that we are seeing. And also, people with very complex needs. So they are acute and they come to us with multiple needs, physical, mental, substance abuse, all that combined. So it gets to be really challenging to manage all that in an outpatient setting. So opportunities, looking at mobile crisis response expansion that will get us, will be able to get access to people. We'll be able to engage people into services quicker, although it may be in the context of crisis, but at least get them engaged in services. We are also looking at partnerships with our workforce, and also looking at registration fixes for a number of areas that we think registration might be the best way to look at strengthening systems and the way we deliver care. And I think that's it.
All right, thank you so much.
Of course.
Questions from the committee?
I have one.
Mr.
I beat
Senator?
you?
No, let me go last.
No, okay.
At this time.
Thank you.
So the MCR, Mobile Crisis Response, are we teamed up with Florence?
We are. So
We are.
that's the
That is,
Pyro
that
part.
is,
Yeah,
that
that's the
is the
Pyro
Pyro,
part,
okay.
yeah.
And that's why they go to Dune City and all over.
Yeah.
Awesome. But I get a lot of compliments on that.
Yeah,
In
it's a-
Florence, by the way, so great,
Mhm.
great job.
Yeah, it's a great program. Been up and running for about 3-4 years now. They are small but mighty.
Yeah,
Yeah,
they're
doing good.
Gail's pretty awesome over there.
Okay, I have Commissioner Trieger.
Thank you. I might have gotten a little late afternoon sleepy lost. Were you talking about the SAMHSA model is for mobile crisis? And if so, is there going to be a grant funding program to go with that? And do you know how long it is? Because I know we just learned yesterday on the opioid board, those SAMHSA opioid response grant funds are running out. soon.
So the SAMHSA is for the whole continuum, so mobile crisis is one
Is
of
one
the.
piece,
Yeah,
okay.
one piece, so it's a place to call, so that's the 988,
Right.
so that's where the 988 came from. So then mobile crisis, and then stabilization centers, you hear it, or other people call it receiving centers, that's what the state refers to. And then I add a fourth leg for the residential housing, because without that, the other systems really are not successful. So that it's that continuum. In terms of funding, so there isn't immediate funding right now, but we anticipate that there will be funding in the future. There is, for mobile crisis, there is the potential tax that is controversial, that's ongoing. So we are not sure how much of that will be successful.
Right.
But for the receiving centers, there is nothing right now, but because the state has adopted the model, there will potentially be funding that will be coming down for receiving centers. We don't have it now.
But probably a competitive grant process or an allocation, or we don't know.
Unclear at this time, or looking at fee-for-service payments, and there are lots of models we can look at. I think that the most critical piece on mobile crisis right now is the same thing we talk about all the time, unfunded mandates.
Yeah.
We are receiving contracts from the state that require us to provide these services everywhere in the county with very specific bullet points and details about how those services are to be provided and the data to be provided back to the state. And we have very little dedicated funding for mobile crisis right now, definitely not enough to support the services. So we are needing to tap into the CFAA. Many of you will be familiar with that as the grant that we receive from the state to perform these systems of care services, but then it is going toward a new mandate with mobile crisis and not toward all of the other dire needs in our community. So that is certainly a continual topic with the state and with the added regulations and requirements on us.
Great, thanks. And then my only other question, and maybe it's on a different page and I lost track, but why there isn't a planned or known need capital project expense for the stabilization center?
Not for this coming fiscal year. We do not anticipate having funding to break ground in the next fiscal year, which is why it's not on there.
Great.
You had mentioned that people in the past, or 2 or 3, 4 years ago, were handling it on their own, and now they are not. Is that, I mean, other than the things I think we all realize, COVID, lockdowns, things like that, is it just because there's more awareness, perhaps? I mean, what is the, I mean, obviously you've done studies, I'm sure, of why all of a sudden are people utilizing the services? I mean, I totally agree, I understand it's happening, but it's just kind of, what changed besides the normal things, or we
It's a
thought?
combination of factors. So it's coming out of the pandemic. There's a lot of, recovery that's happening there where, it's people who had lost jobs that are still trying to get back on their feet, that are not quite there yet, who were, working several jobs, barely making it, but now are not, so they're coming for services. I think of them mostly in terms of, these are social determinants of health needs, right? That go unmet for so long that they manifest in, panic attacks, anxiety. So we are treating a symptom of something that's underlying.
building up.
More of the kind of the social service type unmet needs. That's kind of what we are seeing. It's mostly people who are needing, support with housing, support with other things that then the longer it goes without those services being met, then they are seeking services in other ways. So that's kind of what we are seeing.
Yeah. No, I mean, very viable service, that's just, and that's
Yeah.
kind of what I was Yeah, I mean, that's,
And how about impact of fentanyl and methamphetamine?
And that too, yeah. And that too. So there's that, a lot of substance use, a lot of very potent drugs out there. The latest one, I was talking with one of our providers, the current fentanyl is raised with very potent, chemicals that it takes a lot of naloxone to get people to, to recover. So it's kind of scary out there with the amount of drugs that are accessible and who knows what's in them.
Mhm.
And potential for overdose.
Pill
But this-
presses now, which makes them look like Skittles.
Yeah.
Xylazine gets in your system on the street.
Did you want to be last?
There are so many things to say about the intersection of criminal justice and behavioral health. So I'm not going to go into it. Because we talk about it on a continual basis. And the things that are happening in Lane County really are service models, both regionally and in some cases nationally, regarding what we are doing. Earlier we heard about Captain Riley, who presented this as presentations that he gives regarding behavioral health in the jail and the interaction that he has with your services. But I wanted to mention that when we were back at National Association of Counties, the national conference, I took the FIT video back there to be presented to the association, the Health Steering Committee. Well, the Health Steering Committee watched it during a break, so nobody watched it, unfortunately. But it was up there on the screen. But what I found out, I got a phone call from Neil Moyer while that was going on. We were back in Washington, D.C., and he said, we're on a PBS national feed right now. So this video was on a PBS national feed. I think I told you the entire nation watched our FIT video, while the committee that I was with that was supposed to watch it wasn't watching it. So we got a great deal of credit out of it. And I wanted to just show you that Pauline was in fact the star of our FIT team video and provided just intriguing insights as to what the FIT team, which we just barely brushed on, we could take an entire session talking about what they are doing. So what's happening in our behavioral health department is just beyond words outstanding.
Thank you for making me a celebrity.
Are you getting royalties yet?
Talk to our agent.
Yeah. I just have one small question, and it's related to the Stabilization Center, and congratulations on the congressionally directed funding that you received. What is the timeline for spending those funds? Do you have to have them spent by a certain date off in the future?
I do not have those funds deadline on the top of my head, so
Yeah.
we will have to get back to you on that. I've been most thoughtful about the ARPA funds.
Oh, absolutely. I know, those have a impending deadline for sure, so yeah.
So we will get back to the committee on that.
Great, thank you. Are there any other questions?
Can you talk about the Mossman order? No, don't.
Don't get me started.
Okay, well, thank you very much for your time, and
Thank you.
and it sounds like we'll see you next week.
Yes.
Thank you.
Let's see, Pauline on the screen is the only person to the floor. How's my hair?
Okay, the last item on the agenda is committee business. Is there anything from the committee to discuss? Do you have anything?
The only thing I would mention is that we have firmed up the date for the parole and probation tour that we've mentioned. So May 17th from 9 to 10 a.m. So if you weren't able to tell us that you're gonna make it, please let us know, but we're gonna have it. There was at least some interest. So we'd love for everyone to join us and see that.
what was the time again? I'm sorry.
9 to 10 a.m. on May 17th. It'll just take about an hour, yeah.
Total's all board.
Great. So our next meeting is Tuesday, May 9th at 1:30 p.m.
Yes.
here in BCC conference room. I will not be here in person, so Bruce will fill in as chair. My apologies for having to be in Salem that day.
My apologies also.
Why don't you go get a job?
That's what I'm doing. So, we're adjourned. Oh, sorry, no, we're not.
I made this comment at the break, but so that everybody hears this. Next Thursday, your third work session, we do have some extra time carved out, and so if committee members, if there's some, if you're looking at the agenda and you go, gosh, I want to hear from this department, and it's not on here, the sooner we can know that, the better, so we can prepare departments. So I guess I'd ask that now, like if there's anything you're feeling like you're not getting updated on, we're not doing, and I mentioned this to someone at the break, we used to just have a parade of departments that would come and present, and it was really overwhelming in such a short, And so we've sort of streamlined the process to have more focus on particularly the direct service departments in the community. We've tried to do it where today we have a public safety day, next week you'll have HHS and Public Works, and assessment and taxation, then we're gonna do a legislative update on the last day, but there is some extra time, so just give that some thought and please let us know if otherwise it's time for the committee to discuss issues and or call anyone back if you want more information.
Are there any thoughts about that right now before we?
That's why I asked to talk to Eve on Monday to see if there was. I didn't want to decide there was until I talked to her, and that's when she had time, so if there is from me, I'll know Monday.
Seeing none at this point, so, great, thank you. All right, we're adjourned.
Sarah, when you were talking about congressionally directed